Hey everybody, this is Critical. Once again, we're going to call ourselves the History of Pro Wrestling Video Games. I'm Mongo, joined as always by my co-host Legger Busa. But this week, we have a very special guest. You probably know him from his Aki Did You Know posts, but he's also done posts on a whole bunch of different wrestling games. I'm talking about Melonbread. How are you this week? Well,
I'm
this is the first time
doing,
you've ever been here, but you know.
but yeah, I'm doing very well, and thank you so much for having me on and showing me behind the curtain. I've heard that introduction now countless times, sitting in the car on the way to work. I assumed it would take you 5, 6, 7 takes, but there you go, nailed it first time. A real professional.
Yeah,
we
we only
don't
do
do
we
second
do
takes
everything.
here.
Yeah, everything's in one take.
So
No,
I guess my
delight to be here. Delight to be here. Because as I say, I've been a fan of the show. I think since the very start. So so
Oh, thank you.
thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on.
oh man, you've been here through some stuff, man. um, so I guess I'll start with asking you, like, when did you enter into sort of the Aki wrestling game community? Because I feel like I'd seen your name prior to like the last couple of years on social media, but also I memory hole a lot of things, so I don't know if you actually were there on No Mercy Zone and like the Impact Zone with all of us or not.
No, I absolutely was not. I
Oh,
was. Um, I didn't actually because I was always into the Aki games. Right back to WCW versus the World when that came out in 1997. So played a huge amount of the Aki games, but I didn't actually have a laptop or a PC that could run emulators or mess around with GameShark codes or anything until 2020. I think it was 2020. I finally bought a laptop. I think I perhaps saw, and I might be getting my timelines mixed up, but it might have been the Feel the Bang mod. Somehow must have come across that on social media and thought, wow, that looks amazing. I'm gonna buy a PC that can finally run an emulator, and um, I'm gonna get into this. So I had never set foot on, No Mercy Zone, anything else, and I hear a lot of war stories from that era, but I was not involved at all. So I'd never even didn't have a first clue about emulation, texture mods, hex, GameShark codes, or anything until about 5 years ago.
wow. So like you missed like a whole ass era. So what made you get into like the digging into like the guts and stuff of the game for these Aki Did You Know posts?
Um, I would say that I've always been obsessed. We used to play the Aki games religiously. It was every, uh, 2 or 3 times a week. We would all meet up, and like a lot of people, we would have entire, promotions. We would have title histories. We would have our own characters, and you could only go your own characters. You could never, so for example, I could never control Scott Hall or Kevin Nash, or because those were my friends' characters. And we had, full title histories. We used to keep full records of all the matches, and all of this stuff. We played it for years and years and years. Um, and I'd always been obsessed with, well, what makes these games work? Why is it that when I did that move, he stayed down for 20 seconds and I did it another time and he got up immediately? What caused that to be a KO and that not to be? Why did he kick out of that pinfall attempt there? And of course, back in those days, I used to just sit with a couple of N64 controllers and, you know, perform the same move 40 times and kind of log, okay, which point did he hold their head and things like that. Because I really wanted to know how the games worked. But it was really, really frustrating because, you could never, there were so many variables, you couldn't control it. I didn't have a Game Shark, didn't even know anything about, Game Shark hacking or anything. So I wasn't looking into any of the values, any of the code. And so that probably remained in the background for whatever that is, the next 20 years. I always wished I knew more about what made them work. And then when I started playing probably the Feel the Bang mod, and I started reading about some of the codes and stuff, I thought, well, actually, you know what? I'm going to get into this and I'm going to learn a bit more about this. And I would read all these, the codes and guides and things like that. And they were all hugely interesting. But there was so much focus on things like, move hacking animations and about texture replacements and things like that. And there wasn't really much about how the games work, what the formulas are, how damage is calculated. And those were the things that I was really, really interested in. And I thought, oh, well, if nobody else has got answers to these and no one else appears to really be interested in them, I'm going to look into this and I'm going to see what I can find. And I'm going to try and teach myself, I'm going to teach myself what this, hex, I'm going to try and find out what the hex is. And I'm going to start messing around with this memory viewer. And I'm going to start reverse engineering some of these GameShark codes. And I'm going to start writing everything down and reading everything that I can to try and learn about these things. And it's funny because I also bought I think I had a couple of guidebooks, did I? Or I was also maybe doing a translation of the VPW2 manual. So I started contributing to a couple of Discords. And it's funny, you contribute a couple of things and maybe a couple of GameShark codes, and then it's like somebody takes you aside and says, "Oh, okay, I see that you're interested in this stuff. Did you know there's this other Discord, server over here?" And then it take you to the next level, and you thought, "Oh wow, now I'm really getting into the secrets. These are the real people that know." Then after 2 or 3 months on that one, they would take you aside and say, "Oh yeah, you're really interested in this stuff. Well, I think you would belong on this server over here." And before every time it felt like another level of a secret
It's like the
club.
Freemasons.
Exactly. And every time you went into this one of the, this new, what you thought was the, the real inner sanctum, and you would, and in there would be like, people whose, message board messages you've been reading kind of religiously, going back, 10 years or whatever. I'm obviously going back now to read them, and you're like, oh my God, there's, such and such here. And I didn't really say much. I just kind of kept myself to myself. And I was looking back at old messages the other day, and I saw one from Retro Randy Price, and again it was saying, "Oh, saw you on Freem server. If you'd be interested, here's my server," sort of thing. And it was just every time you went into a new one, a new server, the first thing I would do was, I would scroll back through the entire, every channel's Discord conversation, just trying to soak up. And of course, Discord doesn't really lend itself to that, to being used that way. So it was really quite painful. But I would just scroll back, just try and learn as much as I could about the addresses, about the values. And it's funny because it didn't take long before I realized, well, actually, I'm looking at stuff that these guys have never really looked at before. And I'm definitely, standing on the shoulders of giants. But I made a couple of discoveries, and I would say, "Oh, I'm assuming people have found this before, but I found this," and then people would say, "Oh no, we've never actually found that before." And I just kept on going and finding more and more stuff. But I can't remember what it was that made me decide one day to do an Aki Did You Know post. I think I just thought, well, look, I find this interesting. Somebody else somewhere in the world probably would find this interesting as well. And so I just started posting, a combination of tweets and little videos to go along with them, just to document some of the stuff that I'd found in the preceding, 3 years. And it kind of, I'm not going to exaggerate as to the reach of it, but for me, it kind of took off a bit, and a lot of people were interested in it. But it's funny, the things that you never really expect will get a lot of likes. There's some things that I think, oh wow, this is so interesting. I've always wondered how this worked, and I'm going to post it, and everyone's just like, yeah, I don't care. Don't understand, don't care. And other things, you're just like sort of funny little goofy things. Before you know it, it's got 500 likes or something. So I can never tell what people are going to be interested in.
So there's two posts in particular I think were like the first two I remember seeing from you. One was we'll just go with this first, the running grapple finishers that were cut from Revenge, and then the people in the replies that swore up and down those were a thing.
Yeah, that was a good one. I think I think what I did was I did 3 months of Aki Did You Know, where I did them one a day, and it was really getting to be a bit of a job, a bit of a chore, because one, I'd really sort of run out of interesting facts, and two, to start actually proving the point of what you're trying to explain, I'd quite often have to record a video, and before you know it, you're taking about an hour every day for one tweet, and I'm thinking that's not sustainable, and that's not what I want to do. So I actually stopped doing it, I think, for about 6, 7, 8 months, and that might have been, and Fight Forever probably came out, and then I dipped into modding Fight Forever. and I kind of left Aki for a while. But Ragdas, another hacker who's got a lot of, he's released, I think he's a bit of a machine, 2 or 3 different hacks, and he's a really good guy as well. He'd asked me for some help with something. He'd asked me to look at Revenge, and that got me back into it. I never really looked at Revenge, despite it being one of my favourites. And we were looking at parameters for the wrestlers. You had different parameters. If you leap over the top rope as opposed to walk through the ropes, etc. And I was trying to find the parameter for the tiger mask sort of the diving, the fake dive taunt where you hold on the analog stick as you run towards the ropes and you do the sort of Ray 619 little spin through the ropes. I was trying to do that and see if I'd managed to enable it or not. So I was running back and forth, holding on the analog stick, turning various options on and off. And then I just saw him do a grapple grab as I was pressing it, moving the analog stick. I was like, that's incredibly weird. Running around a little bit more, pressing the analog stick, and he would, do this running grapple, which of course wasn't in Revenge. And then I decided to obviously make it connect to the opposing wrestler. And I think I can't remember if it was Bret Hart or something like that. And he hopped up on his shoulders and did like a victory roll or something. And I was like, wow, I think I've just found, running grapples in Revenge. And sure enough, then I was, one of those ones where I was quite, I was quite excited. I thought, oh, this is quite a big deal. And that was one where that was probably the one that took off the most. And in the end, got retweets from DDP and things like that. Although I'm not convinced that DDP actually runs his own Twitter account. I think it's probably someone else. But still, it was quite nice. But as you say, there was a lot of people in the comments saying, "Why is this news? I used to do this all the time at my cousin's house." And there was nothing malicious about it. That was just people just remembered, that they're just conflating the games together. Revenge is WrestleMania 2000. In fact, they weren't even in WrestleMania 2000, were they? It was only.
No.
So they'll be thinking about No Mercy probably.
And the other
Yeah.
one is like kind of the taunt plus move
Yeah.
post that you did. And I was talking with Liger Boost about this before we recorded, but that's like such a Toukon Retsuden thing. Like the gold combos from those
Yes.
games were like certain characters, if you do, and it's not always the taunt, right? With like Keiji Muto and Great Muta, it's the backbreaker and then the moonsault.
Yes.
Or like Hashimoto, it's the taunt and then the vertical drop DDT. How did you discover that? Because that feels like just a really out of nowhere thing to discover. And is it only in No Mercy, or was that also there in VPW too?
Yes, it's only in No Mercy, and to be absolutely upfront and honest about that one, I did not discover that one. I'm sure I read that somewhere. So that was, I think, known. I don't know when it was discovered, but that was known. When you look at each of these games has got like a massive table with the damage stats for each move. And there's loads and loads of values in there. And most of them are known what they mean, like, damage to main health, damage to neck, or damage to head, damage to body, damage to arm. And then there's spirit gain when you hit the move, spirit drain on your opponent when you hit the move. And there's a whole host of other values, which over the years people have tried to fill in the blanks. And somebody must have looked at it and documented it, because somebody gave me a spreadsheet at one point where it said, like, next move damage or something, or linked move or something. So it must have been known that certain moves link to others. And I think that maybe all I did was take those moves and maybe just test them all out and work out what the damage boost was, and also just confirm that yes, indeed, there was a damage boost, and check the older games to make sure that the same thing wasn't there. And it's definitely not there. It's only No Mercy that's got these extra values in there. But again, it makes you wonder, what was the thought process there? Because if they weren't in VPW2, they put them into No Mercy, but no characters in No Mercy, apart from the obvious ones like the Rock and Rikishi. But so many of the pro res ones, what was the goal there? Did they think there was another Japanese pro wrestling game coming, and that's what they were in there for?
See, that'll start us down the whole Mayhem 2 route, and I'm trying not to be depressed this week.
Yes, yes. That's a fascinating, fascinating story as well. Just because it's only recently I've really looked into the whole THQ. I suppose the history of THQ, because I can remember THQ from when I was, 13, 14 years old when they were releasing, things like the Home Alone games. THQ had just the worst reputation as a game
Yes.
publisher. Just absolute junk. It was just a case of all they were doing was they were grabbing a license. And they couldn't grab the best licenses either because they weren't, they didn't pay the best. So they would try and guess what was going to be hot, and then they would think, okay, if this is going to be hot, it's going to have such a short shelf life. We need to get a game out there that coincides with this potentially being hot. So we don't care who it is. Go and find some local developer. Guys, here's your money, and you need a game in the next 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is. And they had the same sort of approach up until the bottom fell out of it. They had some sort of went down a side alley with a modem. Akira ended up being. Do you ever looked at Akira? There was a game. You should look at the footage on YouTube. A hugely ambitious Genesis Mega Drive game called, based on the anime Akira. And I think that almost bankrupted them as well because it never came out. It was just too technically challenging. And anyway, where I'm going with this is that they ended up with a guy, I think it was Mike Haller. I posted about him on Twitter, who I didn't know at all. But he was the guy that sort of had the Akira rights because he'd worked in Japan. He worked for the consulate, and then he worked for, I can't remember who it was, some film distributor. So then he got in with, I think it was Black Pearl Software in Chicago. Then THQ acquired them, and THQ was kind of hitting the skids a bit. So they got rid of their CEO, Jack Friedman, who went on to form Jack's Pacific and formerly had created LGN as well. So
Yep.
They chucked him out, and they put, was it Brian Farrell? Is that who it was that was the CEO then? And they started to, because Mike Haller had the connections to Japan, and so they started just sort of reskinning or re-releasing Japanese games. And so, of course, when they got lucked into the WCW license, again, they picked it up at a time where they probably didn't realize exactly how hot it was going to get. And they obviously they tapped up Inland to do Nitro, and that was a complete shambles, as you know. And then I think at some point there must have been like to that Japanese, the guy who had the Japanese contacts, right? WCW is now so hot. These Inland guys are so slow, and their game looks crap. What can we must be able to find a Japanese game? And I don't know whether it was the case of Virtual Pro Wrestling on the PlayStation 1 had already been released, and they saw it. Sanders Keel talks about it in an interview about how I think he'd been given Toukon Retsuden and VPW1 and maybe a couple other games, and he said oh, VPW1, that's the one we need to get these guys. And then so this Mike Haller guy apparently went out to Aki and got them on board, and that was a really fruitful partnership. But anyway, where I'm going with this is the fact that obviously Aki ended up getting frozen out, and the irony is apparently it was Aki that introduced Ukes to THQ. I read
That's
an interview
crazy.
recently. Yeah, isn't it? Considering that Ukes are the ones that end up. Yeah, not that because was the story was it that Aki wanted to develop for PS2?
The
PS2.
PS2.
Yeah, and they said, well, we've got Ukes, and we would like you to do the GameCube, and then Aki probably said, well, in that case, then thanks, we'll take our chances with EA or the open market or whatever.
And the way Sanders talked, it was like Aki might have already had the offer because their commitments were done apparently when No Mercy was finished, not when it was released. So you're looking at what at that point, like September 99 or 99, 2000, maybe somewhere around there. So we obviously don't know because Sanders didn't go super in depth on this, but it's not inconceivable that EA were like, hey, are you guys available? And they were like, yeah, hold on a minute. And they took an offer to THQ because Sanders' exact wording was like, we already promised that to Ukes. And Aki were like, cool, we're done. We don't want to develop specifically for Nintendo hardware anymore. See you later. And I've always wondered the alternate timeline of Aki developed SmackDown,
Mm.
like, because SmackDown was already the established name brand on the PlayStation at that point. So like, then you get into that weird Mayhem 2 thing of like, oh, imagine Here Comes the Pain, but like developed by Aki. So like you have Aki, all things being equal, we know he's a piece of shit, but like you have like Aki Brock Lesnar.
Mm.
Or like I'm trying to think of other people. Like you get another version of Aki Scott Steiner, and he probably would have been basically exactly what he would have been in Mayhem 2, same with Goldberg. And like you look at the Legends roster in that game, so like I would have liked to have seen Aki's take on like Hillbilly Jim. Why the fuck not?
Yeah.
Or like
It's
George the Animal Steel, for God's sake.
I want someone to like write a book about just like wrestling game licenses and like the not like wrestling with pixels, which is like a listing of games, but like a full on deep dive into like the history and how all this shit comes together. Because you think about it, it's so interesting. Like
Bix talked
without
about that actually.
oh, did he?
Yeah.
When you think about it, it's like without Fire Pro, we wouldn't have Aki, and without Aki, we wouldn't have the Ukes games because they were the reference. So you know, it all comes around. It's crazy history, and it would be so interesting to read everything about it.
Yeah, it is really well. That was the other thing in the last couple of years. Really got interested in just retro wrestling games in
Mhm.
general, and part of it was that great book that you mentioned there, Wrestling with Pixels, which I thought was really interesting. Just that chronological list of all the wrestling video games. But as you say, when you start tracing it back, when you trace Aki back, there's so many of the fingerprints of Fire Pro in there, and you might to an outsider, you might say, well, really, I don't see it. The grappling system is completely different. But the fact, the health, being on a scale of 0 to 255, and all the limbs having, separate, stamina or health, whatever you want to call it, and things like that. Absolutely, the people that were involved in Aki had, served their time at Human doing a couple of the Fire Pro games. And then you follow Fire Pro back, right back to 1989. And of course, was it Masuda done, pro wrestling on the NES,
Yep.
which there's
Mhm.
so many fingerprints there of Fire Pro. But apparently, according to Suda Goichi, he'd said that pro wrestling on the NES was originally a port of Mania. You ever played Mania, the arcade game? Which was called Exciting Hour in Japan. The
Yeah.
Techno's wrestling games, the precursor to Superstars and WrestleFest. And so he said that originally had started out as kind of a home conversion or a rip-off of Mania, Exciting
Hmm.
Hour. So all goes back, and then of course Mania, Exciting Hour was the follow-up to The Big Pro Wrestling by Technos, which came out in 1983. Was, if not the first pro wrestling video game, pretty close to it. So it goes right back, and it's hugely interesting watching the development of it, and particularly around because I've really got into basically there's two main branches. There's what I call the collision grapple, which is what Fire Pro's got, and what the Superstars games have got, and what WrestleFest's got, the Technos games, where to grapple you walk into each other, and that initiates the grapple, and then you need to, as a gameplay, you've got a gameplay decision as to, well, how do we decide who wins that grapple when they run into each other? And
Mhm.
that's either a timing based thing, like pro wrestling on the NES was, well, the first person to press their button after half a second has gone by wins that grapple. Whereas Fire Pro was, well, we'll wait for the sort of the hips to drop and then we'll press the button. So there's that branch, if you like, collision grapples versus the push button to grapple, which really started with Sega's Appoooh in the arcades. Which again, if you've not played that, you should. It's obviously crap, but it's just a really interesting. You can see so many of the fingerprints in Appoooh, and Geta-san talks about playing both the Big Pro Wrestling and Appoooh, and the effect it had on him. So again, in those games, you've got push button to grapple, which ended up being used by so many games, and the Toukon wrestling games, the Ukes games, and indeed the Aki games end up being an offshoot of that push button grapple. So anyway, it's just fascinating watching those two branches, you know, grow and develop, and all the various games that come off those branches.
Another way that the Aki games, especially VPW 64 and 2, mirror Fire Pro is the whole like the idea of the dream match. Like, what would Hulk Hogan versus Akira Maeda feel like? I mean, that match actually happened, but you know what I mean. Like Giant Baba faces Ultimate Warrior, you have to craft the game that does both of their styles so that like everything is represented well and makes sense. Like that's just kind of like the 10,000 foot view of it, I guess.
Yeah,
I've
and
never played
actually,
Appoooh. I've seen footage of it and it looks really interesting.
it is interesting. It's named after, so it looks like it's called Appoooh because when it's put into English text romanized, it's got loads of O's, APP, and then loads of O's, but it's actually pronounced Appoooh, and it's the noise that Giant Baba would make when he would chop someone. He'd go Appoooh. Uh,
Ah,
and actually, sound effect 1 in VPW2 is called Appoooh.
huh.
So if in the edit mode, so it's actually called Appoooh, and yeah, it's a very interesting game. There's so much of, you know, things like Abdullah's fork attack and the biting, that you'd end up seeing in Fire Pro Wrestling games, straight out of Appoooh. Um, so there's a lot of really interesting stuff in those early games. Um, yeah, but just what you were saying there, Mongo, around these sort of dream matches, absolutely, and that was the big thing about Virtual Pro Wrestling 1. It was just like, well, what if we had all these guys from all these different promotions? And at that point in time, you probably remember people, particularly Japanese people, they really wanted to know, and this goes right back to the days of Inoki. Well, what would happen if a karate guy faced a kickboxer? What would happen if a boxer faced a pro wrestler? What would happen if a sumo wrestler, you know, faced a don't know what, a ninja or something like that? They were really obsessed with knowing that. Now, of course, we know, you know, with mixed martial arts and Pride and UFC and all this, we worked out the answer to that pretty quickly in the late 2000, late 1990s, early 2000s. But in those days, everyone really wanted to be able to play these games where you could have a judo guy versus a shoot fighter and things like that. So absolutely, so many of the Japanese games fed into that question of, well, which is the strongest martial art.
So
Something
your first, oh, go on.
I was just wondering in regards to WCW versus NWO World Tour, is there anything like in the files or that shows like anything that hints at the wrestlers that made it into Virtual Pro Wrestling 64? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is there anything that like possibly hidden? Like, because obviously the Virtual Pro Wrestling 64 wrestler was so much bigger, right? So,
Yes.
and it was released. What was it, like a month later or something like that? I can't remember exactly.
I've got my spreadsheet of release dates, so I can right in front of me right now, so I can tell you that World Tour came out in November 1997, and it came out 20 days later on
Oh God.
19th December. So it's incredible, isn't it? That and I suppose what we don't know is when those games were actually finished, because I don't know
Mhm.
much about the manufacturing of games, but my understanding is that Nintendo themselves manufactured the cartridges. So I'm guessing they had a manufacturing facility in America and one in Japan, and probably had different lead times for for when you had to hand them over to Nintendo to manufacture. So they might not have been. I know that Ragdas has looked into that because he's done a couple of world tour. He did, was it Lafinda tour? He released a
Right.
hack where, and I know that he dug into it. I can't remember who it was, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of the skeleton of a lot of the guys that ended up in Virtual Pro Wrestling 64. And it's so funny because back in those days, although I did import games back in those days because I certainly wasn't going to play the PAL versions of these games because they were much slower. So I imported the Aki games from America. But until VPW2 and maybe Toukon Club 3, I didn't import games from Japan. So I never actually played Virtual Pro Wrestling 64. Now, I think if I'd played Virtual Pro Wrestling 64 before I'd played Revenge, I probably would have been disappointed in Revenge because there was just so much in VPW 64 that wasn't in Revenge, in terms of the moves and just the amount of wrestlers and all the rest of it. And I didn't actually go back and play VPW 64 until I think I finally picked up a copy in 2001, 2002 when I actually lived in Japan at the time. So, and I thought, wow, this is amazing, but if I played it at the time, it might have really, affected my enjoyment of Revenge.
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't play Virtual Pro Wrestling 64 until well after I played the other games,
Mhm.
because in my mind it was just the Japanese port
Yeah,
of
yeah.
WCW versus NW World Tour. And when I played it, I was like, what the hell? Where's
Mhm.
all these wrestlers come from? Like, I knew who the
Yeah.
wrestlers were. It's just like I didn't know they were there. And then I was like, if I was a kid, I would have been so pissed off knowing that
Mhm.
Japan got this version. Obviously, I enjoyed World Tour at the time, but like, what a difference it makes when you've got so much more of that roster. It's just crazy.
Yeah, and all the moves. I remember I got VPW2 and I was just like, wow, this is amazing. You've got Mutus Mist and just all these moves. And it was only a few years later that I realized all those animations were in VPW64. We just didn't get them.
Yeah. And the like electrified barbed wire animations, they were in there, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's crazy. What were they cooking at Aki? They might have been like further ahead than anyone really knew, right? Like if we're thinking about that stuff back in 96, 97.
Yeah, I'm sure they had. I think by all accounts, I think Aki were, I don't want to say they were slow, because I don't think they were slow, but I think they would frustrate their publisher by how long they might take to do things. So I'm guessing that there was just so much of their games they just never got a chance to finish off or implement. And you saw that with World Tour. There's just so many, if you like, bugs, and the fact that there's no, what is it? There's no ground grapples when they're face down. I feel like they're all the same. It's all a camel clutch.
Hmm.
Um, but all the move damage stats are different. Like, so there's like 15 different camel clutches in the game, and they're obviously all supposed to be different moves. Magistral cradles and all the rest of it, Gado clutches and stuff. And they
Yeah.
just obviously didn't have time to animate the moves, but they left all the damage stats in World Tour. And of course, it was rushed to get the Christmas, the holiday trading in America, and so they rushed it out, and it was a good job they did, because the game was, most people did not even, you know, did not even notice, and it was a massive, massive hit. And again, it's always good to put yourself into those shoes of, you know, the publisher versus the developer. Imagine you were Aki saying, "Well, we can't have this. We've got all these moves we've not animated yet. We can't just give everyone a camel clutch." And you've got a developer saying, "Sorry guys, this game's coming out in Christmas, so finish up now
Hmm.
and get it out there." And it's hard to say they were wrong to force them to do that, because it sold sold loads, and really set up THQ at that point, um, incredibly.
To your point about them frustrating the publishers, Sanders Keel said in one of the PWX Dave interviews basically that Aki would always go over budget and it drove THQ nuts, but Sanders would be like, "No, give them the money. You see how much we're selling and you see how much like how high the critical reception is for all of these games." And I think that was also kind of part of the two parting ways, which is really funny because if you look at sort of Ukes' issues with 2K and then the litany of issues between Ukes and AEW, like going over budget was one of the things, and it's almost like you see it from like the outsider's perspective. It's like, just give them the fucking money. You see what they do, just give them the money. It'll be fine. But it's
Yes.
very funny like, when you see the sales and the reception for like all of the Aki games that we got in the West. And like THQ they were just mad all the time, and it's like, why are you mad? Look at this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although it's funny, isn't it, the fact that, so Versus the World was a hit. It wasn't a monster hit, but it was really outperformed expectations. And then they managed to rush out World Tour for Christmas, and it was a massive, massive hit. But it was already, because it was March 1998, that WCW said we're not renewing. So it was, they'd had these monster hits, and by all accounts, THQ it was a real gut punch, really shocked to lose, because it was their biggest seller. the WCW games, and this was before Revenge had even come out. And it would have been a real blow to them. And of course, they landed on their feet because by hook
The
or by crook,
WWF
they
got
managed to get
free.
the WWF license, which was incredibly fortunate, and as that turned out to be the brand to be with. I quite often look back at the WCW, and I can remember at the time when it was announced. I can remember I must have been about 18, 19 at the time. I remember I heard that WCW were going with EA for their video games, and I just remember thinking that is going to be. And as we said before, I was a WCW guy, so I was just so disappointed with that. I just thought, I can't believe you've gone from Aki, who just released World Tour, versus the World, such a good developer, and now you're going with EA, who are going to release some rubbish. But again, there's a difference between a video game fan and somebody running a business, because can you really say that WCW were wrong if it was whatever £10 million?
I mean, EA was the biggest video game company at the time. Like, I get it from like the optics of it, is like we've upgraded, and I was like 8 when Mayhem came out, and I just remember thinking like, oh, it's being made by EA Sports, and then it didn't even have the fucking EA Sports logo on the box. It was regular EA, and when I saw that, I was like, oh, because like even then the connotation was like the EA Sports games, those were the ones they tried on because those were the ones that sold. Regular EA, you have like a 30-70 shot of this game being shit.
Yeah, and this, whenever you hear Eric Bischoff speak about that deal, he always talks about it like, I managed to really turn that company around because I had no license and no merchandise, and then I signed this deal with EA Sports, and then we did the EA Sports deal, and the fact that in his head he hadn't, he didn't know or care enough to know the difference between EA and EA Sports. But you can imagine that meeting. It's like, oh yeah, I'm really interested in EA Sports, and then EA just be like, yeah, EA Sports, okay, yeah, just sign here, mate. It's just like, it's money, and as you say, that cachet of Electronic Arts, they do Madden. Wow, we've hit the big time. And again, when it comes to the merchandise, and again, Bischoff, not that Bischoff was in charge of the merchandise. Really, I think it was Mike Weber that was doing the merchandise, or whether it was Susan Sadello or something. But you'd always said, WCW didn't get involved in it. We left it to the licensees. They paid for the license, and they could really do what they want. So WCW didn't really get involved in the video games, and they also didn't really care whether they were any good or not. They had their money, and they didn't really see it as, well, if the video game is good, we'll get more. We'll get more fans, and if the video game is bad, we'll get less fans. They didn't really see any connection there or correlation between one and the other, which I think was a little bit short-sighted. But I'm not going to sit here and claim that lack of a new Aki game was the difference between WCW going down the tubes or not.
No, there was a lot of fuckery going on at Turner that ultimately doomed them.
I can't remember what I thought at the time, but when I heard that I signed with EA, I probably just hoped that Fatboy Slim was on the soundtrack. FIFA 99, it was great.
I didn't even play them. I was incredibly snobbish, I would say, about wrestling video games in those days.
Yeah.
I would never have. Frankly, I probably would have only really played Japanese wrestling games, and so as soon as I never even bought Mayhem. I think I've played it once on an emulator, and
it's not great. Honestly, I
don't think it's bad. I mean, I don't like that the default stance is like everyone's got T-Rex arms. But I mean, I had some fun back in the day with it. Like the craziest thing to me about that game was when I made Mike Awesome creation, and somebody tried to give me a Hurricane Run off the top rope, and he reversed it into a power bomb off the top, and I was like, holy shit! Like what? How does that happen? And yeah, I mean, the commentary was probably the highlight of that game.
It's the best commentary in any Western wrestling. Like I'm not even kidding. It's a real King of Colosseum 2 level. Like this sounds like a broadcast. But I also understand, like, I didn't have an N64, so like I didn't get to play the Aki games until like late '99, early 2000, when my cousins let me borrow their N64, and I played Mania 2000 and Revenge. So I didn't have the like real tangible like heartbreak of going from revenge to mayhem. I went from thunder to mayhem,
Ugh.
which is you're going from the inland shit to something that's you can at least make a little bit of sense out of the gameplay. So I liked mayhem. It's like a solid 6 out of 10 on a good day. Backstage Assault, however, that game was a fucking mess. But also, we talked about this when the Mayhem 2 render video came out recently. It's really funny how they were like just mortified by the idea of putting the EA Sports logo on a WCW game. But right there on that Scott Steiner render is an EA Sports big logo. So like they eventually I guess got over it, and then we didn't end up getting that game. And obviously Def Jam Vendetta gets the EA Sports big treatment, but not Fight for New York. That's EA Games. But by that point, EA Games actually had a decent reputation. But that's such a weird period to look back on because they transitioned to EA, and it's like the same time they transitioned from the original San Francisco toy makers to the Toy Biz figures. So it's like the video games get worse. Nobody's going to argue against that. But like the action figures get really good like right away. It's like, oh, these are all right. And David Bixenspan, for anybody inclined, I don't know if the article's still there. I don't remember what website it was on, but he wrote an article about the whole great license swap of '98, and he and I actually, for a brief period of about 2.5 years, were Twitter mutuals because he had made a tweet about Paul Heyman's claims that THQ actually had bought the ECW rights, and this was in '99, so they'd already had the WWF rights by this point. And he and I went on like this odyssey through like old Google groups and observers and PW torches. And like with anything else, it was a bunch of bullshit from Paul Heyman. But it was like, man, imagine if this wasn't a lie and Christmas '99 was Hardcore Revolution on the N64 developed by Aki. Like, I kind of want to see the universe where the WWF actually did go with Activision, because that's a really fascinating what if, because what the hell would that game have looked like? And then we could have, got the standard THQ experience with ECW, and the game would have sold like shit, but I would have been happy.
That means we would have got Stone Cold and Tony Hawk.
Yeah, see, that's like the Mayhem. We've gotten too close to the Mayhem 2 vortex in this episode. Far too many times.
It's funny you mention Activision because Mike Haller of THQ, I think that's his name, he'd said that when THQ got the WCW license, they beat out Activision for it. So what I don't know is, one, whether he's remembering that correctly, but two, if Activision had got the WCW license, it's almost certain, isn't it, that they would have used, instead of using Power Move Pro Wrestling, they would have used Toukon Retsuden 1 for their first WCW game.
Yeah.
Which would have been interesting. And then, of course, was it Toukon Retsuden 3 that was at one point going to be WCW NWO Live?
Yep.
And again, I'm assuming that they just kind of ran out of time to do that because I think THQ had to get their games released by sort of the end of 1999, and they probably wouldn't have had time to localize Toukon Retsuden 3 then, so they probably just said to them, yeah, just hold fire, guys, we've got some plans for you for a new license.
And there's like all the stuff that was reported that like, oh, it's going to have a create a wrestler mode, which obviously Toukon Retsuden 3 didn't have. And it was going to feature the New Japan guys, but also WCW guys.
It had create a wrestler.
Yeah.
Does it? Oh God, my brain. Yeah, no, I'm dumb. I was thinking of Toukon too. My bad.
Yeah, that's because I remember like one of the big things was everyone posting like Hayabusa, create a wrestler. But the way I understood it was, I think to the press they showed off Toukon Retsuden 3, but by the time like they would have developed the game, I think it would have been like just WWF SmackDown, right? Because that was like not the same engine; it was the pro wrestling engine. But yeah, the way I understood it was like, we'll show this off, and this is a general idea, but once they would have actually worked on it, would have been SmackDown basically.
I don't know the full detail, but I've always assumed it was a case of, okay, we're coming to the end of this WCW license. It's still really hot. Let's get another game out. We're not going to have time to develop one. Why don't
Mm.
we see if we can, Mike, use your usual magic. Go and find a Japanese game that we can reskin and rebadge. Okay, Toukon Retsuden 3, let's see if we can get that out. Show photos to the press of Toukon Retsuden 3 with a couple of the WCW wrestlers on screen. And then I'm guessing they just ran out of time. Or alternatively, maybe it was the case that you said, well, actually, we're working on this, which is a lot more action oriented, that we think will do a lot better in the American market. And the
Yeah.
combination of the new license, and they said, yeah, well, do a bit more of that, and we'll do it as a WWF game. But I don't know the details.
So my memory on this isn't great. Was WCW NWO Live being shown alongside Thunder? Because I remember the big Game Pro magazine, the Fighter's Edge spinoff of it that they did too, where the two games being previewed, and this was later '98, right around the time Revenge came out, I want to say. But it had like the big Revenge preview, but also like a big preview for Thunder. Because I didn't get the internet until 2000, and that's when I learned about WCW NWO Live. And I'd never seen anything about it in a magazine, at least as far as I can recall. I might have. So, like, did they have two games in development at the same time, or did they shelve the Toukon Retsuden 3 localization to have Inland shit out Thunder? Or were both coming?
I think both were. I think both were intended to be coming, but maybe just because I think it was at E3, perhaps they either announced it or they certainly it was on their. Because I was looking at some THQ filings and in all their sort of corporate filings, they talked about the games that were coming up, and they definitely have filings for WCW NW Live on the PlayStation. It gets confusing because Revenge at one point was called WCW NW Live, and that's why you
Yeah.
still see signs in the crowd for WCW NW Live and Revenge, and they decided to switch the names halfway through. But definitely at one point, they must have been thinking, "Oh, we'll get, we'll get a localization of Toukon Retsuden 3 out, and then we'll also get Thunder out early in 1999, and we'll make as much money as we can out of this license before we lose it." And I'm guessing it just didn't, timing wise, it didn't work. And maybe they looked at it and thought, actually, we're going to end up, eating into our Thunder sales if we try and release one game and then another one on the PlayStation 1, very, very soon after it.
There
I mean,
was
they didn't give
a
a shit about that because they shit out Thunder, or not. Well, yeah, they shit out Thunder on the N64. They call it Nitro, and that's only a couple of months after Revenge. I think like 4 months, 5 months. It's
there was
very weird.
a
They were doing everything to get the money out of that license.
yeah, there was a poster on eBay one time that was WCW NWO Live, and it said Nintendo 64, and it's basically
Yeah.
just like the Revenge artwork with like
Yeah.
I think like the giant was it the giant?
Yeah, the Giant in DDP, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Like maybe Scott Hall. Certainly, the
yeah.
cameras pointing upwards at the wrestlers.
I wonder if WWE Vault has any like behind the scenes of like those photo shoots of Revenge and stuff. Because I know one of the best of WCW DVDs they did has like Sting in that attire from the WCW versus the World cover, and I always thought that was super interesting because he never actually wore that. That like the wrist tape and stuff during that time period because he didn't wrestle. So I was wondering if there was like any stuff
He does a
behind the
dark
scenes
match
stuff.
against Scott Hall in that gear in like
Oh, does he?
March of '97. Yeah, Chris
Oh,
Zellner's talked
interesting.
about it. He was there live for it, and the crowd was going fucking nuts for
Oh
it.
shit! I want to
That's
see that.
something. Yeah, like that's one of my big WCW page ones. If they're gonna do like unseen matches, I want to see that Scott Hall and Sting dark match because apparently it was awesome.
Yeah.
And that was
How?
also one of my big ones from like Mattel. Like, just do that version of Sting. I don't give a shit that he never wore that on. Jazzwares could do it too.
Yeah, absolutely. How hard would it be to look into? I don't know if you've even tried it, but like the Def Jam games, because like I also wonder if there's like any possibly WCW Mayhem 2 stuff in Vendetta, maybe.
Possibly. I'll be honest. I've never looked at them. I wouldn't even. I'm sure it'd be some, vaguely similar. Freem would know a bit more about those games.
Uh,
I'll be honest. I kind of checked out as we talked about before.
yeah,
2001, when WCW went down the tubes, and Aki were no longer producing pure wrestling games.
I
I moved to I left the country at that point. I moved to Japan, so I was out of touch anyway, and so I didn't even actually play the Def Jam games until a few years later. And I think when I was in Japan, I bought at least one of the Kinyu Command games, and I played it, and I was kind of like, yeah, this isn't really what I'm after. So I was, yeah, I've never really been that into the Def Jam. I liked them fine, but I was just, when I played them, I was thinking, yeah, this isn't really what I'm looking for.
When you moved to Japan, were you already like a fan of Japanese wrestling, or did you get into it when you moved over there?
Yeah, no, I was already a fan.
Okay.
Which was poor timing, because it was pretty much dead at that point. It had been killed by mixed martial arts and New Japan trying to put Nagata and Liger and put these people in the mixed martial arts matches, and in Pride and K1 were all anyone really talked about, and
Yeah.
no one really talked about pro wrestling. So I never really, even when I was over there, and it was so difficult. I didn't have cable TV or satellite TV over there. It was so difficult to find the program. I think it was on like 3 a.m. or something like that. So I would have had to, one, work out how to work my VCR, and two, work out how to read the newspaper to find out when New Japan's weekly show was even on TV. So other than going to a few live shows, I saw some really good. I was at Wrestle Kingdom 1, and I was also at Noah Destiny, where I saw Kawada Misawa's last match, and also the Sasaki Kobashi match. So I saw some good events when I was there.
like
I'd
maybe the
say,
greatest match to ever happen in the fucking Tokyo Dome, that Kobashi and Kensuke match.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. Whereas Wrestle
20
Kingdom 1,
years this year.
yeah, Wrestle Kingdom 1 was, my recollection was, I was just kind of bored. I don't really remember much about that at all. I can remember at the end they played Hashimoto's music, and Muto and Chono posed, but apart from that, the rest of it was, well, pretty forgettable. But maybe
I was actually in the ProRes fan AIM live chat for that. There was somebody in the chat that was watching the show on pay-per-view and was giving everybody live results. That's a weird show to look back on, because I remember being really excited for it, because 35th anniversary of both companies, there's a lot of interpromotional stuff on that show. To me, the main event of that show was the Minoru Suzuki Yuji Nagata match, because I was a big Suzuki fan in the mid 2000s when it seemed like everybody thought he sucked, and I was just like, no, this guy rules. I love this guy. And Nagata was one of my favorite guys, even going back to WCW. I was a huge fan. At one point, my cousin got really mad at me. I might have said this on our Revenge episode, but I won all of the singles titles that you could in Revenge with Yuji Nagata, because I thought he was fun to use. And my cousin came home from work, and he turned Revenge on, and the next morning I'm eating breakfast. He's like, "Why is the Japanese guy got all the belts?" And I was like, "Uh huh." And you had the Tanahashi Taiokeya match, and I think that's Dangerous Rapture, Kawada versus Nakamura, which was a bad match, and it's not Kawada's fault. But yeah, it's not a super exciting show, and honestly, the 08 one with the TNA involvement really isn't either. I would honestly say the first good Wrestle Kingdom is the 2012 one. 2013.
I don't even remember that one, to be honest. They all mixed in my brain.
2012 is the Okada return and the Tanahashi Suzuki main event.
Go back to Wrestling World at the Tokyo Dome. I like that name better anyway.
I think the problem now is Wrestle Kingdom's a much stronger brand name, because they've been using it for 18 years. Yeah, I'd rather they just go back to having the cool, unique names like Battle Formation and Do Judge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do Judge. Whatever that means.
It means Kensuke is going to disgrace New Japan, and Kawada's going to be in the title tournament on January 4th and not win it, even though he was supposed to, allegedly.
Yeah.
I got to ask you, your first Blue Sky post was about HAL Wrestling for the Game Boy, which, for those that are uninitiated, we've tried to do 2 different episodes on it, and both times the recording is fucked up. So eventually we're going to circle back to pro wrestling and how wrestling, but it's also a game done by Masuda. And I did not know until you made your post that Maeda has his infamous spinning wheel kick that busted open Tetsuya Fujinami in '86, and Inoki actually does have the Enziguri in that game. How did you discover those two things, and have you found anything else interesting in Hell Wrestling? Because I love that game. That's unironically one of my favorite wrestling games of all time.
Oh, is it? How did I find that? I think for that I probably trawled a lot of Japanese websites. So I think I perhaps read that, or I read it on a guide. On the Critical Club forum, there's a Fire Pro forum. There's a guy there. I think it's Fire Pro fan. I think the same guy that has done loads of game facts
Yeah,
over the years.
that's one of the real MVPs of this community.
Yeah, well, he's got loads of. I actually contributed some money towards it because I was just so grateful for what he's doing. He's bought loads of guidebooks from Japan for all these wrestling video games, and he scans them and he uploads them to Critical Club. So can't remember if I read it in one of those guides or I read it on another website, but that was where and then I fired up the emulator myself and tested it out. And I do have a reasonable amount of once you've worked out how Nintendo 64 hacking works. And again, the other thing I want to say is I've got no programming background whatsoever. So if I can, give any sort of message today, it would be if you're interested in any of this stuff and you think, oh, I'd like to be able to do that, or I'm really interested in knowing how that works. Well, you can just go and do it, frankly. All I did was start Googling and start finding websites and give it a go. So, and as I said, where I was going with this was that once you kind of know how memory works in the Nintendo 64, you know how to search for values and things like that, you can pretty much do it in a lot of the other old systems. So I have done a little bit of digging into old PlayStation games, NES games, SNES games, and Game Boy games because so you can sort of have a look at the health and things like that, and carry out little experiments to get to the bottom of it.
I had another question about that game, and I've completely. I saw the Mayhem 2 Scott Steiner picture again, and my brain just shorted out. Uh, have you ever thought about looking into like the SmackDown games, or were those games not games that were on your radar when they were current? Obviously, you said before we went on the air you were more of a WCW guy.
Well, I was, and I think I must have played. So somebody must have taken SmackDown 1 out and put it in the PlayStation 1 time. And bear in mind, this would have been, after I'd been playing the Aki games for 4 or 5 years. And I think we played it for about 3 minutes or something. And I was just like, what is this? It was just so chaotic. It was just so, so far removed from a lot of, what I liked about the Aki games. There's so much weight to the Aki games. People argue about whether they're simulation style, and they're not, but they're a lot more simulation style than the SmackDown games, and just crazy stuff like people running into each other and then all 4 people falling over, and just absolute chaos. And I just played it for 3 minutes and just thought, I'm not interested in that at all, because I'd liked Toukon wrestling games. I think I'd only played 3 at that point, and I liked it. And I played that SmackDown one. I just thought, wow, that's not for me. And then I was completely prejudiced then against the Ukes games. So I didn't play, Shut Your Mouth or Here Comes the Pain for, probably until about 5 years ago. So I did miss out on some of those games. Now I did look relatively recently. I did start trying to understand a couple of the games about how some of the reversals worked. So I did start digging into them. But I don't my PlayStation 2 knowledge of how they work and the assembly coding isn't as good. So I'm really slow at it, and I never really stuck with it. So to answer your question, not as much as I'd like to, but I'm always really interested in all these games as to how they work and what makes them fair and things like that. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why this is probably going to offend you, but King of Colosseum 2, I could never really get into it. And I think that the thing that
Oh, that's
I know,
sacrilege.
I know. It's, well, the thing is, no. See, the thing is, let's be absolutely fair. I liked it. I liked it fine. I would probably put it in my top 10, but it would be down towards the bottom of the top 10. And I think the thing that, and maybe I've just not played it enough, or maybe I'm misunderstanding how it works. But we talk about the game mechanism, and it felt to me like there was a double, because you not only had to grapple with someone, which in the Aki game, once you've grappled with someone, that's it. You've got the advantage. You've done the hard work in terms of that meta, that mini game. It was 50-50, but you won it. Well, in King of Colosseum, not only do you have to grab them, but then you've got another timing mini game afterwards. So it just seemed like, from a gameplay point of view, I don't know. It just felt like, because let's say you're playing an equally matched opponent, you've got a 50% chance of grabbing them, and then you've got a 50% chance of winning the timing thing. So you've actually only got 25% chance of performing the move that you want to do. And when you factor in things like top rope moves and things like that, where you've got additional steps, it just felt like, oh, this isn't. I don't know. I just didn't think the balance was quite right. But I'm also prejudiced as well, because, and I know it shouldn't matter, but the sort of animation and the graphics in King of Colosseum, it just kind of took me out of the immersiveness of it. They were just a bit too ropey by that point. But anyway, I'm hoping to be convinced about. I'm open to being wrong about the King of Colosseum games, and I probably just need to play them a bit more.
I think what you've
So,
said is fair, especially with the graphics and animation. I like the way the gameplay feels in that game, and I'm also like a really big nerd for like 80s and 90s Japanese wrestling, and that game basically gives you the sandbox.
yeah,
Like, here's most of the legends, here's a few of the rings, all of the arenas that you'd want to use are basically represent. I mean, Castle Hall's not in the game, but it's not in any game. And the move sets are really big. Like, the number of grapple moves you have in that game is fucking disgusting. The fact that we don't have anything that comes close to that since then really, really makes me sad.
mhm.
The game can be a little unfair with like the criticals. Like, don't ever wrestle Kendo Kashin with criticals on, because that little motherfucker will get you with an armbar. There's nothing you can do about it. It's going to happen. But I like the way the matches flow. I like the idea of the Powerball system, mainly because I initially played KOC2 with my friend who would run through all of his Powerballs and then he would have nothing left. And it's just like, haha, here's three burning lariats. Have a good day. Um, but like I think it does a lot of things really, really well. I also think it has, to my mind, the best representation of like shoot fighting that we got in a wrestling game. And
Yeah,
like, I love the Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 version, but just by nature of KOC2 being, 4 years later, built on a game that came out 2 years after VPW2, it's not just you immediately take somebody down to mount. Like, there's guard, there's the different positions on the ground, and so in that way, if you like mid 2000s MMA, it's perfect because it's got everybody that you'd want from Pride. Basically, it's it's a love letter to like a really wide swath of specifically Japanese wrestling and mixed martial arts, and that hits all the buttons for me, honestly. But it's not as simple as the Aki games. Like, the Aki games are, like you said, the grappling system is much easier to understand. Once you've got the grapple, you've basically won the battle.
yeah. Another thing about the Aki games, and Iwashita said this himself, or maybe it was Kon Takumi, had said that they didn't want to have people trying to remember move sets. They want people to
Mm.
know, you know, which move, not necessarily which moves your character had, but to know which slots your guy would have moves in, and to know that you wouldn't be repeating your move, and that thing around. And Firepro does this to a certain extent. And this goes right back to Appoooh in terms of down on a button, it's going to be a pile driver, a power bomb. Up on the button, it's going to be a brain buster, or something like that. So Aki does that. But the other thing that sometimes took me out of King of Colosseum was, sometimes you would have to go and refer to to the move list, and sometimes you had duplicate moves in certain slots, and sometimes you didn't have any moves in certain slots. And again, Aki, I think, purposefully, and what Aki meant as well was that, to a certain extent, not everyone played like a great representation of themselves. But you kind of knew you didn't necessarily have to have played as that wrestler before. You knew which moves they had in which slot, and if you knew they had a power bomb, you had a pretty good guess at where it was. And maybe that's the same with King of Colosseum, but it was a little bit like All Star Pro Wrestling was a bit like that. You had to know the move sets in All Star Pro Wrestling. You had to know, okay, I get a different move if they're in groggy and I'm in, whatever. If I press triangle in direction, it's going to be a different move than normal if they're in this state, or for this other wrestler, it might be exactly the same move, and you've got to know and remember. And I really like All Star Pro Wrestling, but it does that extra level of having to think about your character and consult a move set from time to time takes you out of it a little bit.
Yeah, so those games sacrifice accessibility for the sake of depth, especially King of Colosseum.
Yeah,
Because I've done grapples in that game trying to do a power ball because like why wouldn't this guy have a power ball grapple from this spot? And the AI just elbows me in the head, and now I'm stunned and I'm getting the shit kicked out of me. I don't think KOC 2 is perfect, but I think it does like what it does better than anybody could have ever hoped to accomplish other than that particular team. And again, I'm a sucker for something that gives me everything I want to have fun. And that game gives me not only everything I want, but it gives me like 5 times more shit on top of it. Like
yeah,
I don't necessarily need half the current at the time All Japan roster in that game, but I'm happy to have them because that's more people to feed to Stan Hansen. And also, I like the way certain characters feel in that game versus other games, but that's also part and parcel of having like more moves available.
yeah.
Because like when you have like 24 front grapple moves, it's a little bit easier to make like Terry Funk or Osamu Nishimura or Dory Funk play like how they would than it is where you have like 8 grapple moves. And that's not me knocking the Aki games. I love those games to death. But like if I ever played as like Dory Funk, for example, in like Virtual Pro 64 or the Destroyer, I'm always like, I kind of wish I had more moves. Can I have some grapples on the diagonals too, just for fun?
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I want to see Sam from UPW floated around the idea of using the diagonals for additional moves at one point. Then this was early on, I think, and I don't think he's going through with that. But it is a question too raised, like when they're doing something that's so inspired by Aki's, as we talked about before we started on the show, is like how far removed do you go from Aki, to do your own thing and the changes that you make and people's reaction to that and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's so difficult, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
we've all got things that we really like about these games, and we've all got things that we think, if I could control this, I would change this. And that was one of the reasons I got into hacking. Was like, for example, when we used to play it, we used to have rules when we played the Haki games that you weren't allowed to. You could start a taunt, but you weren't allowed to finish it because that was just too cheap. It would be too easy to just sit there and taunt the whole time. So you weren't allowed to do that. And I thought, well, if I could control this, I would just remove that spirit gain from a taunt. So that as soon as I could learn how to do Game Shark hacking, that was one of the first codes that I did was, appeals no longer, increase spirit. And I can remember I posted that code, and there's loads of people saying, this is ridiculous. This is completely missing the point of the Aki games. The whole point of the Aki games is, you run around, you taunt, you run away from your opponent and taunt. Now, that sounds terrible to me, but for some people, that is the fun of the Aki games. So, we've all got our own reasons for why we like them, and it must be a really tough situation to have all these people invested in you delivering that, the new version of that. But what you want to make some of your changes, and then you've got to be concerned about, well, what does everyone else think? And either you just take the opinion of, well, this is my vision for this. I'm going to do it the way I like. I don't care what anyone else thinks. Fine. Or you try and please everyone, and before you know it, you've got all sorts of options that you can turn on and off in menus, or you just decide, no, I'm going to keep it exactly as as true as possible to the original, and I'm not going to mess with anything. Not easy.
Yeah, it's when I was looking at Retro Randy's ECW mod that he's working on. he had added some moves, just like standard suplexes, and I looked at them and I was like, this is so much smoother than the original suplexes, or some of them that were in Aki's older games. I was like, you could just take them out, because I don't see myself using that original suplex anymore, and once I've seen this one, it looks so much better. But then again, yeah, if you're doing something that's seen as a spiritual successor, if you remove that, people are going to be upset that that's no longer there. And I guess that's where we basically talk about UPW, because I guess you're going to be seeing it in a few weeks, right?
Well, Sam, as you maybe know, Sam at UPW, he and I were actually, he's based not too far from here. I don't know how long it is,
Right.
but maybe 30 minutes. And so when we realised that, and this is going back a number of years now, we always said, oh, we need to meet up at some point. And again, back at, was it Christmas or maybe even Christmas before, I'd said, oh, Sam, I'll need to come out and see you, and he'd said, oh yeah, I need to have you out. And then more recently, as I think he maybe mentioned on his Discord, he was saying, oh, we'll definitely need to get Melonbread out over to the office once we've got something that we can play UPW. So I don't think I'm breaching any confidence. I'm sure Sam won't mind, because I think he posted something similar on the Discord where he was saying, yeah, almost ready to have you out to have a play around. So I'd be really, really excited. It'd be really good to meet Sam, because we never met before. It'd be good to go out and see how he's getting on. I'm always interested to see how people get on with any projects related to pro wrestling video games. And again, just I suppose to clear up, because I saw somebody posted on Twitter the other day when I think they were going to have an announcement, and they said, "Oh, Melonbread, is this anything to do with you?" I'm not formally involved in UPW. I'm just like everyone else, an interested bystander. I backed it as the same as everyone on Kickstarter. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think it'd be, if we talked about before, any one of these endeavors with a small team is really, really hard to do, and they take a lot longer than people think, both people on the outside and frankly people on the inside. So
yes,
I've got very, very realistic expectations, or if you like, perhaps no expectations. And as and when something's released or is available to play, great, looking forward to playing it. But I'm in the fortunate position that, very busy man, and I'm not, but I'm not upset about the fact. I know a lot of people are upset about, well, where's the demo and things like that. And yeah, just I'm looking forward to playing it. So yeah, I think Sam has said that he's gonna host me, and I'll go out and play it. Although, as we were saying beforehand, what do I know about video games, or about what makes a fun wrestling game? I know a little bit about the inner workings of the Aki games. I've got my own preferences for video games and for wrestling video games, but I'm just as likely, I could suggest to Sam, oh, change this, change X, Y, and Z. And most of the people that are looking forward to this game coming out might absolutely vehemently disagree with some of those decisions. So just because somebody like me knows a little bit about the mechanics, and mechanics, I mean the formulas. I don't know anything about the movement, or how you make 3D models move fluidly, and get the wrestlers running around a ring. I'll be able to tell them whether I like the feel of it or not, but I certainly can't help them with that side of things.
if you want to like pull out your phone at any time and like sneak some footage out, that'd be appreciated.
I'm sure that when they're at the stage where they're showing me it, I wouldn't be surprised if it's shortly after that they would be releasing something else. But it'll be interesting. So yeah, looking forward to it.
We need you to go and test the wrestling code as well.
I'll be honest, I don't even I hear you guys talk about it, and that's actually my only exposure to that game is when I listen to the podcast. So I don't have I don't have any. I've only got secondhand, and from what I hear from the people that I listen to, you two, it doesn't really make me want to go out my way to find out more about it.
Well, you do know 2022 is all gameplay.
I do remember hearing that at the time. So But again, it goes to show you, and I don't know anything about that. And I hear you guys also talk about, is it PWX? And again, I know nothing about that. Frankly, I'd never even heard of it, and certainly hadn't been following the saga. But
You didn't know about PWX?
I did not. I did not.
Oh my God, brother, that's like a 25-year odyssey.
Yeah, well, but again, I can imagine that if I'd been invested in that, I would be so, I don't know what, disillusioned, disheartened. But if anything, it just goes to show all of us there's a lot more goes into these things than we think. And we were talking before we came on. I think in any big project, any big endeavor, naivety is a bit of a superpower, because so many people go into these things. And again, I'm not saying UPW or Sam's naive, although I think he did say in one of his other videos he was a little bit naive about the animations. If you really knew, if you had that full 2020 foresight as to how much would be involved in some of these things, you would never start it, because there's just so much work. And actually, there's a lot to be said for being completely oblivious to how much is involved, because before you know it, it's like, wow, that bit there, that chapter took so much more than I thought. It was be plain sailing from here, and then the next chapter, wow, that was so much. And before you know it, you've managed to achieve something, because you've gone through all these things that were just so difficult. But if you'd known beforehand, you would never have started. And unfortunately for me, I've got a lot of foresight, which is why I don't generally, like, I've never done my own hack. You see people releasing, like, their own, the hacks and things like that. Ragdas has churned out loads of them.
Yeah.
Ray has got one out, hasn't he, on VPW2, and Randy's, really interesting stuff with Randy with the ECW and Backlash and things like that. I'm a bit of a planner, a project manager, so I'll do, I'll maybe do a move set, or I'll, do some textures, and I'll think, right, okay, well, how long did that take? And if I was to release my own hack, how many times would I have to do that? And multiply it out, and then say, okay, and how much free time have I got? What, an hour a week, 2 hours a week? Okay, if I was to do this, it would be finished in 2042. And then I say, yeah, that's not happening, so I'm just not going to start it.
You'd probably still beat the wrestling code out, though.
I probably would. But I've just seen, even in I'm not going to claim that I'm really old and, long in the tooth, but even in the 5 years that I've been doing the hacking and the modding scene, and everyone's really, because everyone's a bit older now with these games, everyone's exceptionally cool and supportive. But every 2 minutes you've got somebody fresh faced come along. It's like, oh, I'm going to do this, and here's my idea for a hack. And of course, everyone starts out the same way. Here's all the wrestlers that are going to be in it, and and then they go and work on something like I don't know, the title screen or something, and you just think, oh, bless, fingers crossed for you. But I'm willing to bet that in a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months time, you're going to say, yeah, I'm abandoning that. That was a lot more work than I thought. And again, I'm not saying that about UPW, because I've got no idea. Sam's developed games, I think, in the past, so he's probably got a lot more experience and knowledge than I do. But as I say, if as and when something's released, I'll be happy to play it. But as with any of these projects or anything I back on Kickstarter, frankly, I've got no real expectations. And if it comes out, great. If it doesn't come out, well, we all know what we're getting into when we back something on Kickstarter.
So have you played any of the modern WWE games?
I have. I think the very first one, since I had that experience with SmackDown 1, back in whenever that came out, was it 2000 or something like that? And then I didn't play another WWE game until I think WWE 12 or 13. I can't remember which one it was. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it fine, was my recollection. And then I since then, once every 3 years or once every 4 years, I'll buy it. And so I think I had, after that, what was the next one I had? I think I had one before 19. I certainly got 19. And I think my next one was maybe 23. I can't remember. So I check in every so often. And whenever I play them, when I first play them, I'm like, wow, this is actually, this is quite amazing. 'Cause I quite like simulation type stuff. And so you play it, and there's quite a lot of it that's quite, quite slow and methodical and realistic. But once I've played a couple of games, I don't really want to play it again. And of course, I'm at the stage now where I don't know any of the wrestlers. And whenever they put an old wrestler in the game, it usually looks like dog shit. I'm just like, wow, that's DDP, or that's Lex Luger, that looks terrible. And the moves, I'm always disappointed with the moves, because they just don't look as good. And I don't know whether it's the way they're doing the motion capture, or it's just the difference between motion capture and hand animated keyframe type stuff. I never think the moves look good, and I don't have time to do create a wrestler stuff anymore. But anytime I've done it, again, I'm amazed at the lack of moves. Because usually the guys I want to create, I'm looking for some pretty basic old-fashioned moves, and quite often they don't have them, or they'll have a power bomb that looks nothing like the power bomb that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So I'm always, I suppose, technically impressed by these games, but I don't play them enough. Another thing because I don't really have time to play games, I'm always absolutely overwhelmed by the amount of time almost the developers anticipate that I'll be spending on it. It's like, wow, I want to unlock this. I need to do this much. I don't have time for that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I never really get into them, and it's one of the reasons why I actually the Fight Forever. We talk briefly about Fight Forever. A lot of people complained about nothing really to do in those games. Well, for someone like me, and I'm not saying I'm typical, there was enough. There was enough for me. I've still not played as everyone in that game, and for me, Fight Forever. Once because I don't know if you've ever played the sort of mod that I released that extends the length of the matches.
Yep.
Once I'd done that, I actually really enjoyed Fight Forever, because I thought it played really well. I got the matches around about the 9-10 minute mark, and it was enough for me because I'm not. Yeah, I don't do create wrestler stuff, and yeah, playing through the season mode once or twice, it was all right. I'm not going to claim it was brilliant. But for me, all I do with any of my games, when I load up Wrestle Kingdom or something like that, or load up All Star Pro Wrestling, all I'm doing is loading it up and playing one match or two matches. And so Fight Forever's on that same sort of rotation of every few weeks I'll load it up, I'll play a match, and I'll say, well, that was good fun, and I'll stop playing it. So I've got a lot more time, if you like, for Fight Forever, just with my own personal circumstances. The other thing I think about Fight Forever, and maybe you can tell me if you think I'm crazy, but I again, I had lower expectations because it's the first game in a new series. I know you might say, well, come on, Ukes, is it really the first game in a new series? But yes, I think it was. And when you compare it to other first games in the series, compare it to, I don't know, what, WrestleMania 18, or, take your pick, even WWE versus the World, or, All Star Pro Wrestling 1, it's hard to make the first game in a series really good. And I thought if this was the first game in a series, I thought it would have been one of the best first games in a series there's been. And, to the point where I would have really looked forward to the second installment or the third installment, where they do have time to build out some of the other stuff and give it depth. So it's a wee bit disappointing to me that it doesn't look like we're going to get, or almost certainly not going to get Ukes doing a follow up to it, and another follow up to it, because I think they really could have made that into something special.
I talked
Yeah.
to somebody recently that said that they don't think, like, whatever happens going forward, they're gonna run with the source code for Fight Forever if they do another console game. But the temperament, as of the last time I talked to one of my friends in AEW, was like, well, we already have the code, we don't need them. Which if that's true, come on.
Yeah, that seems a little bit naive as well, doesn't it? To think,
Yeah, it's like saying, yeah, we have grandma's cookies recipe. It doesn't matter if she's dead. We don't need her to make them.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
suppose
really the same thing, but
no, I can imagine that's not. That doesn't sound like a recipe
You,
for
a recipe
success.
for disaster. Yeah, you tried your best on that one. I think the thing
No, I didn't. That's the worst part.
regarding it being like the first game in the series, and like the first attempt, you sort of have to sort of a bit in a way lower your expectations. But I think the problem with it too is that as you said, it is Ukes, and they are coming from a lot of experience in wrestling games, and also there's like modern expectations too. With all the WWE games that it's still, even if it's the first game in the series, you expect, a fully fleshed out creator wrestler and a lot of moves and all this, and the game was just lacking in all those areas, right? Like, I know you said you don't spend a lot of time in creator wrestler, and personally, I wouldn't have either, but like I would mod wrestlers into the game. That's what I did with my PC version. But then when I would mod them in and I would look at the movesets, I was just like, there's nothing here. There's nothing for me to
Yeah,
use.
yeah,
And obviously
yeah,
that was where that game, suffered a lot.
yeah. Although there's no doubt, but again, I suppose, which games going back through history, and bear in mind my knowledge of games kind of tails off very sharply in the early 2000s. Um, but even in the, for example, the Aki games or Toukon and things like that, when you had creator wrestler modes in them, they generally only had moves that they needed for the wrestlers in the game, or moves that they had already animated for a wrestler in a previous version of the game.
Right.
There wasn't that much in the way of, you know, spending time and money on animating moves, particularly as, the way they're doing the animation is a lot more expensive for people that aren't in the game. Um, so, and again, I think, as you say, that expectation, and maybe it's just me, sort of pessimism. I didn't really have that expectation because I thought, particularly when it was delayed and over budget, because we knew that before it came out. And as soon as I heard that, I thought, well, if it's delayed and over budget, they're not going to be spending any time, and it would be completely nuts from a business point of view to be spending time on doing things like animating moves for wrestlers
Hmm.
that aren't even in the game, because it's not going to sell any more additional copies. The people that are going to buy it are going to buy it, and the people that are interested in Create Wrestler are going to buy it anyway. And an extra 5 or 10 moves aren't going to make a difference. Now, I would have liked an extra 5 or 10 moves, and talk about the mini games. I played one of the mini games once, and never again. It was absolutely zero interest in those mini games. But again, I'm realistic about, well, if you didn't do those mini games, what would it have allowed you to do? And I'm not convinced that it would have given you much more than what, an extra 5 or 10 moves. Which, great, I would like that extra 5 or 10 moves, but it's not going to change my, yeah, it's not going to. And it was, I suppose, it's one of those sort of asymmetric business decisions, in that it had a very low chance of being successful, the mini games. But if they had been successful, it might have allowed them to be that crossover hit. You guys have spoken about this before. That was they were trying to recapture that. Back to World Tour and Revenge. Those were crossover hits. People that went into wrestling would play those, and that was that. The moonshot of trying to achieve that. Now, of course, they didn't achieve that, and again, with hindsight, you could say that was just a complete waste of time and money. Um, but I can see, with all the troubles in the development of that game, I suppose I did have. I thought the gameplay would be good, and the bit I was disappointed in was the fact of how quick the matches were. That to me
Yeah.
was, I thought, wow, I can't believe you've got that wrong. I was also disappointed in the movement. I think that they didn't quite get the movement of an Aki game right, but I managed to sort of get over that. And when it came to having additional animations for wrestlers that weren't in the game, or a a create a wrestler suite and the ability to create really good create wrestlers like the WWE games, I'd expected that. I wasn't disappointed in that, because I didn't really have any expectations. But I
Hmm.
can see why, if you did have expectations and you did expect it to, and you were comparing it to the WWE games, then yeah, absolutely, you would have been pretty disappointed.
Yeah. Do you know exactly like what was hidden in the, excuse me, in the game files? I know there was a lot of talk about like cage matches, and I think it was 6-man tags.
6-man tags and 8-man tags, I think, were referenced in the game tables. Certainly 6-man tags, definitely. I never saw anything about cage matches, and I never saw anyone talking about cage matches. But yes, 6-man tags. There was a few other things. It's been a while since I delved into Fight Forever. There was definitely a mechanism whereby you could store your special. So that was in there, and there was things like strike battles and things like that referenced in some of the tables, but I was never able to re-enable either of those. And obviously you maybe saw I managed to re-enable the hot tags,
Yeah.
which is where you sort of hobble around and you can't run anymore, and you do a sort of dive and tag to. So that was in there and sort of half finished state. And they had some other things in there that they clearly messed around with, like, for example, they had it so that you couldn't do a strong grapple until your spirit went above a certain level for the first time. And once it went above a certain level, like 70%, then strong grapples were unlocked. So they would have messed around with things like that, and you can re-enable those. But I'm guessing they thought, nah, let's scrap this.
Interesting.
So the strike battle was actually, if you remember, at Tokyo Game Show, they had the thing. It was like an analog stick command, I think, for like a chop battle,
yeah.
and nobody ever activated that in any of the footage that we got to see.
Yeah.
Yep. It's because somebody had footage of like, it was like fan footage, right? And they did show like the controls when they were recording it.
And there was a chain wrestling thing too, right? Because I remember we talked about like, oh, that's kind of Wrestle Kingdom of them.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
then
Well,
chain wrestling makes it in.
Yeah.
And
Do you remember?
Oh, go on.
I was just gonna say, do you remember anything about cage matches?
Me?
Yeah.
I remember Mike Straw referenced it, that there was a cage match. It might have been Mike Straw. It might have been somebody else that I was talking to at the time. But someone referenced they had cage matches finished, and there was at least menu text somewhere in the files for it.
I know somebody did a mod of like a cage match, but you had to do like, they used like an elevator to get like on the top of the cage because it wasn't.
Oh, yeah. That
Yeah,
was your good friend Lynch. That was Lynch.
Oh
You and him.
God, right.
Yeah.
The less said about that stack of snake feces, the better.
We'll move on then. It's funny, cage matches. Like every so often, I go back to, I'm going to re-enable. I'm going to make sure. And Styles is thinking about this as well. I need to re-enable cage matches in VPW2 because they're mentioned in there. All the animations are in there. All the damage stats are in there. There's a menu item for it that says cage match. And I'm like, oh, I really need to re-enable that at some point. And then I think, why? It wasn't any fun. As you guys have said before, cage matches are never any fun. But it's just one of those things where, it's like, oh, I could have had a cage match. Need to re-enable it, regardless of whether it's actually going to be any fun to play.
So with the cage match, are you able to do the martial arts rules inside the cage?
Well, I'm sure. Well, no, this is the thing. No one's ever been able to re-enable it. But I bet you must be able to, even whether you've got to. Styles is pretty good at SK Styles at grabbing whole chunks of code from one of the games and putting it into other. I'm sure Randy and Freem would be able to do the same. So I'm sure it would be possible to re-enable it. And once you've re-enabled it, there's absolutely no reason that you couldn't, have, because you can mix and match any of the rules, in VPW2, and actually you can. Yeah. So you absolutely could have a mixed martial arts match in the cage.
Could you
Because
potentially
that's
use
like
those?
the one utility I could think of for. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, sorry. I was thinking like, is it possible to use like those exploding ring animations to make like an exploding cage match somehow?
I'm sure it would, and I think that maybe Randy's got some ideas about
Ooh.
using some of those. I always think, in terms of people in the community, some of the stuff that Randy does is incredible. It's always the way, isn't it? There's probably people who look at what I do and think, oh wow, this guy's a magician, and really I'm not. It's, as I say, I've only sort of picked this up in the last few years. But the same way that I look at like Randy and Freem, and I just think, wow, they're magicians, and probably what they're doing isn't actually that advanced if I once I get to that level. But to me, some of the stuff that he's doing is really, really impressive, and he's doing it in assembly coding, because there's various levels of how you hack these games, and everyone sort of starts with the Game Shark hacking, and then there's not that many people graduate to the full assembly stuff. And Randy's one of those guys that has, and yeah, some of the stuff he puts together is incredible.
Have you seen the ECW project he's working on? Because I've played the early preview that he's released,
Yes,
and it's
I've played that.
by like 45 miles the best ECW game ever.
Yeah, and there's so much more. Like, because I've been, because whenever Randy's working on an animation, he posts it to his Discord. So I've just seen so many more animations that that aren't even in that. So there's it's just a huge amount of work has gone into it, and yeah, it's the fact it's the new animations I think that really make it, and also just all the other crazy stuff he's managed to do with weapons and tables and things like that. He's really taken it to a whole new level.
Hammerstein Ballroom looks amazing. Like I never
Yeah.
thought we would see that.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, the new animations, like I said before when I was talking about like suplexes and stuff, kind of just blew me away because they're sort of just like flawless, Like seeing new animations in an Aki game just still completely blows my mind.
Yeah. And even just that, the fact that I don't know if you've ever seen the application he does it in. He's basically taken No Mercy and he's reprogrammed it so that it's a move animation editor, all within.
Yeah.
So it's just absolutely nuts what he's done there. And it's the same. It's nuts what Freem's done with VPW Studio. These sorts of tools. I find it absolutely mind blowing. And I'm not saying there's not a learning curve. I've tried to use Randy's animation tool, and yeah, I didn't really have the patience for it. But some of the stuff that people have done, and Randy is really good at using it. And yeah, as I say, it's just it really gives like a fresh lick of paint. But it was the same. I remember Six Men Scramble. I loved Six Men Scramble, but in Fire Pro D and a couple other games, when they redid a few of the old animations that that had been in it for a decade or something, it was like, oh wow, this is and I actually really love to see, if you like, a whole reanimation project. I think they're similar in Fire Pro when they released Movecraft, but I'd love to to see everything, like every snapmare, every scoop slam, reanimated, because again, I think that would give make these games really fresh the way that Randy is doing to a certain extent, and some of his Backlash stuff as well. I know that he's kind of put Backlash on the back burner a little bit, but some of the stuff in that looks amazing as well.
I've only seen some of the stuff he's shown publicly for that, like the Hell in a Cell, the tables. I think one of those clips has the SmackDown Fist stage in the background and like an updated Kurt Angle and Rob Van Dam, and that looks incredible. He's again, we talked about it last week. His Patreon, I think, to get the ROM hacks at the entry level, I believe, is $5. Absolutely support that. Especially if you love No Mercy. That's the one that he's focused in on, and play that early preview of ECW. Is it Born to Be Wired? I think is the name he's going with now.
Right. Yeah,
and it's so much fun, and it's only going to get better as he finishes more of it. Have you ever played any of the M. Dickey games?
I have never played an M. Dickey game. I don't actually know M. Dickey, but he very generously, when I was doing the Aki Did You Know, he had a, what do you call them? Ko-fi, coffee. I thought, oh, I'm going to put something here, because I'll, see if anyone wants to donate something. Not that I need the money, so I don't really know why I did it. But anyway, M. Dickey very kindly sort of donated or pledged £64, because it was N64 games. So I thought that was a very nice thing for M. Dickey to do. So I've never played his games, but I really should. That was one of the things I was going to do, was I was going to go and spend some of that money to buy one of his games. But I know that I've just said he's a nice guy, because I know that you give him a hard time on here, don't you?
Well, yeah. One of these days we're gonna play the M. Dickey show game, and I think that's going to be the one that takes both of us out.
What's the Jesus one again?
The New Testament, as opposed to the New Testament, I believe. Yes.
Yeah. We should play that.
Yeah,
I think Shawn Michaels is in it.
I would imagine there's a cameo from the Heartbreak Kid. Yes.
Hmm.
I only ask because his games are very divisive. People either love them or they're the worst fucking thing ever. You're not going to find anybody who will ever have the opinion of, they're all right. And I was just curious as to where you fell on the
Yeah,
on
as I say,
that sort of spectrum.
I'm afraid I've not played them. As I say, I've still got my prejudice. I'm prejudiced towards Japanese wrestling games, and unfortunately, that means I don't really play anything that's not Japanese. I don't play many modern games either. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've not really not played it. I'm afraid, or not
Uh,
played any of them. There's a variety of them, isn't there? But not played them.
I don't know how easy it would be to get the early 2000s ones running on modern hardware. But the one I really did enjoy was Federation Booker. It's a 2D. Obviously, the main mode is your booking, but it has the same regular gameplay that the other 2D games had. That was before he got into like the really. I say this like before he got into the. You can do really insane shit in that game, but like nobody's losing limbs or anything like that. It's a very simple 2D wrestling game that also clearly uses the ring from WrestleFest and the sprites from Fire Pro. But I liked that one. And I mean, when he did the Wrestling Revolution 2D, he kind of got back to that. Honestly, his stuff just works better in 2D. The 3D games are way too. What's the word I'm looking for here? Ambitious?
Right. Okay.
Like when you're trying to do like 8 million things, but none of them are done particularly well. But the 2D games, you don't have any of the superfluous stuff. You just have the thing, like the wrestling. And I think if he focuses on that, the games aren't the worst thing I've ever played. They're kind of fun, but I'm still flabbergasted that you didn't know what PWX was.
Yeah, well, as I say, it must have, because when did that all kick off? Because bear in mind, I left the
Oh
country in
two.
2000. Well, I left the
Yeah.
country in 2001, and then that was me. I didn't really have any interest or involvement in either. Didn't watch wrestling, didn't really play wrestling video games other than going back to, you know, for nostalgia purposes, all the games I'd grown up with. So completely passed me by.
Man, you missed so you missed so much. So what are your thoughts on like the Super NES, like Genesis era, like WWF games? Because that's another one that people either love them or they think they're the fucking dirt worst.
Well, so when those games came out, I was like a lot of people probably across the world, but certainly in the UK. I kind of got into wrestling in the late 80s, early 90s. Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and all the rest of it.
Mm.
And then there was a period where you sort of grow out of it for a while, and that was when a lot of those games came out. So I remember playing Super WrestleMania, and I borrowed Royal Rumble, and it was a sort of guilty pleasure. You didn't really want to be seen playing those games, but when you were sort of, for me, probably a 13, 14-year-old, I actually quite enjoyed them, but I enjoyed them to borrow them. There's no way I would have purchased them because they were so lacking in depth. Particularly Super WrestleMania. Super WrestleMania was just embarrassing. The fact that everyone had exactly the same move sets, and the fact that they were just you know essentially button bashers. So liked them fine, but and then kind of just put them, as I say, played them a little bit. I liked Royal Rumble, that was okay, but put them to the side. But that was why when WCW versus the World came out and we played that for the first time, it was like, wow, this is kind of revolutionary for a wrestling game. This is, I think Sanders Keel said, and it's funny you use this phrase because this is how we described it when we first played it. This is like chess. It is so slow and methodical, and there's just so much kind of strategy and logic behind it. If I go for a grapple, the counter to it is this, and if I go for a strike, the counter to it is this. And there's a lot wrong with WCW versus the World, but it was just so far removed from the sculptured software games, and even things like I don't think Wrestle War was never released, was it, in the States? Wrestle War was the Sega, the Genesis. It was also an arcade wrestling game, which again was looked really cool, but was basically just a button masher. in the same way that Main Event, by Konami was a button masher. That was just wrestling games in the West was. You just hammered the buttons as fast as you could.
Was Wrestle War released in the US?
No.
I don't think it was. It was released in the UK and in Japan, but it
Oh,
never.
okay.
And the Japanese cover is wild
Yeah, with
the whole
Hogan
game.
on it, yeah.
Yeah,
with the blue bandana, and I think Brody's like it's very clearly Bruiser Brody behind him.
yeah.
It's awesome. I love it.
Oh yeah, such a cool game. And the Japanese one, the fact it's just sort of a black trunk, like Inoki Fujinami style guy, but just so much stuff in that game. The planches and all the rest of it. There's a lot, and in the the super pile driver, just that pile driver where he jumps way up in the air and the cool
Yeah.
German suplex. Yeah, it's such a very, very cool game.
One game I never hear anybody talk about, and honestly I haven't really dove into it deep myself, is Toukon Club for the
Oh yeah.
Famicom.
Mm-hmm.
Have you played that?
I have played that, and I'll need to remind myself because when I play these games, I write down my sort of thoughts on them. And I've now forgotten what my thoughts on Toukon Club were. But I think there's no doubt that Toukon Club was because it came out really late in the Famicom's life. There was already a lot of Super Nintendo wrestling games out at that point.
Yeah, it's like what, 92-ish?
Yeah, something like that. So it was probably the best of the Famicom wrestling games. But I still wouldn't necessarily, it's really interesting from a historical point of view. It's got sort of weird rotation as well, hasn't it? There's sometimes it's isometric, sometimes it's. So yeah, there was some odd gameplay oddities. It made it difficult. You could only go up to, if you want to go to the top rope, there was only one of the corners you could go to. I think it was when the screen went isometric, you could go to the one that was in top in the middle. So it had some odd gameplay choices, but it was that sort of Fire Pro timing basis, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah.
You just unlocked a memory. I thought for a second I had only heard of this game in passing, but I'm watching gameplay of it now. I want to say I saw screenshots of this on what at VG Museum, maybe it was MU Asylum, and I was just like, I don't know why, but I thought it didn't look like a wrestling game, so I never downloaded the ROM for it, and now I kind of very badly want to play this. This looks, I'm not gonna say it looks good, but it sure as hell looks interesting.
So with your time in Japan, does that mean you can translate Fight Depon for us?
No, my Japanese is okay, but as you'll know, it's a lot easier to speak it than it is to read and write it. So
Yeah.
My reading and writing is not as good. But these days, you know what it's like. You can hold your phone up to anything and get a reasonable translation of it. So if you can put up with holding your phone up all that time. But no, but I never actually played that. Again, I think I just thought, it's going to be too dense, the Japanese text. So
yeah,
yeah, you know what it's like though as well. I think we've all, to a certain extent, developed a certain ability when it comes to Japanese wrestling, pro wrestling video game text. We've all got a certain knowledge of a certain amount of kanji to help us get through the menus.
to me it's just memory.
Yeah.
It's fifth from the top or whatever.
Yeah.
I always remember, even back before I could read it, thinking like, 5 jellyfish means 5 minutes. For that's how you see the same characters over and over again. And it got to the same where certain wrestlers' names and stuff you would remember.
I was gonna say that's an excellent point, because I've run down match listings for Japanese wrestling Blu-rays on here, and there's some of the time I don't necessarily need to use the translation, because I know I know what Antonio Inoki's name looks like. I know what I know what Vader looks like, and you get really familiar with this stuff playing the games. I've seen people say I need a translation to be able to play Virtual Pro Wrestling 2. And even beyond the fact that the menus are really similar, I don't know, you play that game one time, and I think it being so similar to Mania 2000 helps, but play that game one time, you basically you can figure everything out,
Yeah.
and figuring it out there also helps you when you play Fire Pro or King of Colosseum or All Star Pro, because even though the menus aren't the same, you start to recognize what things are like time limit, ring out, pin, submission, etc.,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
There's
Sorry, I was going to say, sorry guys, I'm going to have to go shortly. But before I go, I found my Toukon Club notes. So here's what I wrote about Toukon Club. I've said apparently Natsume's first wrestling game, I think.
yes, that's right.
Yeah, a suggestion that was maybe going to be localized as Natsume Championship Wrestling, because that later they used that name,
Oh,
didn't they?
okay.
So
Yeah.
maybe. It was the 8th and final wrestling game on the Famicom, potentially the best. It's actually got, this rings a bell, like 8-way directional strikes. So it was like there was a couple of boxing games that had that same sort of 8-way. You can strike diagonal up right, up left, as well as right up. So that's quite odd, isn't it? You don't see many games like that. My other notes here are collision grapple rather than push button grapple, and if you wait for 6 frames to pass and then it's the first one to press the button after 6 frames have passed. So I must have, when I looked at this, I must have got right into some of the code and looking at how you actually win a grapple. And also you start the match outside the ring, and then the bell sounds and you go into the ring, so you can actually jump your opponent before the bell. That's quite interesting. And it's
Yeah.
also got an anger meter or a rage gauge, Ikari meter, and it builds up when you receive damage. And I've got my notes here. Is this the first game to have the concept of absorbing damage to build spirit? Which is actually interesting. Before we go, the one thing that I actually really liked about Virtual Pro Wrestling 1 on the PlayStation was when you were on the receiving end of a submission move, your spirit would increase.
Right. Yeah.
And I actually quite missed that. I liked that mechanism because that seems kind of right, that the crowd would get behind you and your spirit would raise, you know, as your opponent's kind of wearing you down and got you in a figure 4 or something. So I remember being a bit disappointed that they changed that mechanism for World Tour, because then it becomes it's a spirit drain from that point onwards in the series.
Yeah, that's more of like a very Japanese thing of,
Yeah,
willing the wrestler to get to the rope and building their spirit up that way, definitely.
yeah. And again, did you ever read? It's down now. We must have taken it down or stopped paying for the website. But Geta-san had a blog where he talked about his developing virtual pro wrestling, and he had one on the spirit meter, and he had some sort of he'd said he never he couldn't believe that, first of all, the Aki games were popular in the West, and he was really surprised that anyone got the concept of the spirit meter, because to him it was just so Japanese. It was such a
Right.
Japanese concept of someone getting beat up, or somebody having to really dig deep, and then they could unleash a technique or a move that even they didn't know they had in them. Because again, in the first, in Virtual Pro Wrestling on the PlayStation, it's not your finishing move that you do when you've got your special up. Your finishing move was almost always one of your strong grapples, or like a move from the top. It's usually something something else.
hmm
It's kind of like a sort of unusual move, almost a bit like a super special rather than a special. But yeah, he always talked about how he was really surprised that the Western audiences, and he said, they sort of, people in the West, they conceptualized it more as momentum rather than spirit, which then does make sense of, well, I'm gaining momentum here, as opposed to the way a Japanese person would think about it. Again, I'm going to stereotype as, well, no, this is you getting, this is you showing your fighting spirit. You're really getting beat up. You're bloodied or whatever. You're getting worn down, and that's what's building your spirit. Which, of course, again, sorry, I will stop talking at one point. That's how All-Star Pro Wrestling works. You
Yeah.
build that spirit meter by getting beat up. And yeah, you can win the match without ever getting beat up, without ever building that spirit meter. But if you really want to go and unleash those sort of superhuman type moves where you actually go beyond, what you even thought was possible, you need to absorb damage, which then goes back into, Japanese questions about, they always talk about, I can't remember what the word is, ukemi, that sort of level of cooperation, of, the fact of, having to take cooperation, having to take moves. Anyway, off on a tangent, but so the rage gauge was maybe the first kind of example of that back in Toukon Club. And when I've got in here in my notes, when enraged, you move faster, you take less damage, and you deal more damage. And more importantly, you can perform your secret move if you have one. So that's there's a few interesting gameplay developments in that game.
Yeah, we're gonna have to
I'm
take
really interested to play
a
this
look at
now
that.
because, like,
Yeah.
yeah, Tecmo World Wrestling has long been my, like, I go back and forth between that and pro wrestling as far as like what I think the best wrestling game of that console. I mean, Famicom, NES, they're the same thing ostensibly. Which I think is the best. This looks really interesting. I don't know if it's ever going to replace like Tecmo for me, but this looks really fucking cool, and I wish we got it here.
Yeah, we'll check it out. So I
Yeah,
know you
I
said
definitely think. Sorry, I was going to say I'm looking forward to. I know you've taken a few a few weeks off from the wrestling games, but hopefully you'll go back and pick up a few of the Famicom, and even before pick up Appoooh and a few others, and get back on the pro wrestling video game bandwagon. That's just from my own
I
selfish
think
point of view.
we talked about Appoooh before.
I think so, yeah.
What, a whole episode? Then that must be one that I've.
No, I don't think we
We
actually.
never did an episode. We talked about like discussing
Right,
it on the
okay.
podcast, like playing
Yeah.
it, and
Right, okay.
yeah, in like the early Technos games, I've only played Mania like one time ever in my life. So
I
like,
think that's a really good game. I think it's completely, and as I say, so important to the not only the development of pro wrestling video games, because as I say, that's what pro wrestling and then Fire Pro came out of, but then also Superstars and WrestleFest came out of that. But also when Mania came out, that was before Kunio-kun and Double Dragon. And that was Technos that then used basically the same engine. This was like Mania was essentially the first belt scroller, side-scrolling beat 'em up. And again, it doesn't really get the credit for that. This came out before any of those games, and if Technos used the same gameplay model for them. So it's just a hugely important game. So yeah.
I never even considered the Double Dragon aspect of like what Mania ended up being used for later. Yeah, I've had a hankering recently, because I was really disillusioned with wrestling recently, which is part of the reason we stopped focusing primarily on wrestling games. But I'm feeling the Toukon burning deep within my soul, and I kind of want to play some Japanese wrestling games
Get that
again. And
checked out.
Yeah, definitely.
yeah,
And
we've got a few.
I think definitely, and that'll reinvigorate you, and you don't have to worry about. That's the beauty of nostalgia. You don't have to worry
Exactly.
about the imperfections of today. You can go back and wallow in the the cheap dopamine of nostalgia and things that have passed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Toukon Club looks so cool. By the way, I looked it up on eBay. Very expensive game if you want to buy a copy. Good lord, $240 from my
Cool.
friends at Ryopian Shop.
That's like 10,000 Canadian, I think, at this point. So
Shout outs to that eBay store though, real quick. They are the reason I have the entire Fire Pro series. Literally every one of the Super Famicom games I got from them, including X Premium for like $30, complete in box. It's like mint. So shout outs to that.
Cool. I know you said you have to head off, but before you go, do you have anything coming up on your Twitter account in regards to like Aki or anything else that you can share?
I suppose a couple of things that I'm working on at the moment. I've got I don't know if you've seen it in any of the videos. I've got like an Aki dashboard, so it plugs
Yes.
into the Project 64 emulator, and it just does things like it gives you if you run it at the same time as you're running your Project 64 emulator, it'll give you health bars. You can see things like the current wrestler's health, all the limb strength. You can see the AI skill level, which is quite interesting as you go through like Road to WrestleMania or King's Road Succession, because you can see the levels of your opponents change. And it's also got, I don't know if you've noticed, it's got like a stat tracking of health versus spirit as the match goes. It plots it on a graph, so it's quite interesting seeing the sort of ebb and flow of matches in these games. It's quite interesting to look at the graph like that. I'll probably add a few more features to that, so I'll see about getting that getting that
Very
finished.
cool.
And the other thing that I've been doing, and I can't remember why I got into this, but somebody must have steered me towards looking at Road to WrestleMania and WrestleMania 2000. So I've started, but again, just really trying to dig into, because again, people were saying things like, "Oh, am I right in saying that the difficulty goes here when you go into this match, and it's when I got here it was really difficult and things like that." And so I started looking into, well, how even is that? How does that mode hang together? How are the rankings dealt with? How is promotion and demotion dealt with? And how are the difficulty levels dealt with? So I've got about halfway through that. So I've found some interesting stuff. And again, what it really boils down to is the fact that, because I just assumed it would be exactly the same as VPW2's King's Road Succession mode.
Yeah.
And actually it's not. It's a lot simpler. Because King Road Succession mode tracks the win percentages of all the wrestlers. And you go up and down as your win percentage. Whereas it looks like in WrestleMania 2000, it's a lot more sort of linear than that. It's like once you've got 7 wins, you can move to the top. You've almost like there's rankings, but to move up them, you just need number of wins. And then there is still some other stuff in there, like percentage chance of title shot. Because again, people are playing through it and saying, "Oh, I never got a shot at the the European title or something. I must be doing something wrong." And actually, there's like VPW2. Sometimes it's just based on percentage chance of it, and sometimes you just you'll be unlucky and you won't get a shot. So it's quite interesting. I vaguely remember WrestleMania 2000 playing the story mode, but it's quite interesting going back and pulling that apart. But quite time consuming. But as and when I've get to the bottom of those investigations, I'll post them, and they might be of interest to someone.
Oh,
Excellent.
they'll be of interest to me, especially. Next time you're on, I have to ask you, once you've done your deep dive with Road to WrestleMania, why the hell some of the undercard guys in that mode are like asshole mode difficulty compared to everybody else?
I think it would be interesting then for you to turn on that Aki dashboard, because the way that first of all, it looks like whatever difficulty level you've got the game on has no bearing whatsoever on Road to WrestleMania. So it can be on hard or on easy. It doesn't affect Road to WrestleMania. And instead, your opponent's difficulty is based on where they stand in the rankings at that point. And the difficulty level is either, because the difficulty level in the Aki games is out of 1,000, and the difficulty level is either 150, which is super easy, or 550, which is basically normal level, or 990, which is the equivalent of expert or hard. So there's such a massive difference depending on who you're facing. What their difficulty levels are. It's so uneven compared to King's Road Succession, which has got them properly spaced out across a much narrow banding. But it would be interesting to play with the dashboard on to see whether it really does coincide to, because you should be able to tell as soon as the match starts. You look at the AI skill and it says like 990. You should know, all right, okay, I'm in for a tough match here.
Yeah, okay. I would make use of that because it's always seemed like when you face Hardcore Holly or like Midian and Viscera or Gangrel, like I've always had a way harder time beating those guys than when like, oh, I'm facing Steve Austin. That's a cakewalk. Gangrel's like throw the controller at the wall and find another hobby level difficulty sometimes, and it doesn't shock me that they simplified Road to WrestleMania. That seems like just generally simplifying things seems to be a recurring theme with like import wrestling games when they get brought here in one form or another.
Yeah.
You've got to.
But we'll let you go. You did say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say you've got to realize too that Gangrel is a vampire. So.
Yes.
Well, yeah, and Midian and Viscera were possessed by the Undertaker. So
Yeah.
Take that into account. Well, anyway, thank you so much for having me on. And keep up the good work, and hopefully at some point in the future you'll have me back again.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Anytime, man.
Good stuff. Right. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Guys.
You too.
Cheers.
Cheers. I really enjoyed that conversation. I had totally forgotten about Toukon Club. Like I said, I was getting ready to be like, oh no, I've never seen this before. And then like I watched a little gameplay footage of it and I was like, oh no, I've seen this. Interesting to note. I found a copy on eBay. That game doesn't have a traditional Famicom cartridge. It's got like one of the larger, like black plastic, like it looks like a Famicom equivalent of like a Tengen,
Yeah,
Tengen
exactly.
cartridge. Yeah, that. And what a weird roster too, because it's got like Inoki and Abby and Baba's in there and Hogan's in there. Like, yeah, 100%, we got to play that.
Yeah, I remember bringing
Yeah,
it up before because I probably saw it in Wrestling with Pixels. I think that maybe that's actually when the first time I saw it, and I was like, that kind of looks interesting, but later era NES game, is there anything there? But from what he said, yeah, it definitely seems like something we should check out.
yeah. I've been looking like for the last few minutes at gameplay footage of this. This looks really cool. Like animations are super simplified, but it's an NES game with like the little chibi sprites, and I actually kind of love the shifting perspective. That's it gives like a
Interesting
weird
idea.
3D effect.
Yeah,
Yeah. God, I wish we would have got that here. It probably would have sold like shit, and it'd be one of those games that if you wanted to buy a copy now, it'd be like $500 or whatever. But like,
yeah,
so you might have had to have changed the Hogan guy though. I just put him in red. Just put him in red. It'll be fine.
yeah.
So there's action figure news for the week.
Did you hear my
I
cat in
don't
the
know.
background, by the way?
I did not.
Oh, he's being so this. My cat was like super quiet and shy, and now he's obsessed with like only drinking water if it's directly from the sink, and he shouts his ass off every single day until you give him it. He wakes me up in the mornings. That's why I'm always grouchy in the mornings now. But I always give in to him because he's a cat. But yeah, action figure news.
So Zombie Sailor teased a big reveal, and basically was like, "Oh, we're gonna break the internet like we did when we announced Punk." And Mitch Craig, this is the one time I'll give him any credit, mentioned that the reveal was Wednesday, which would have been Owen Hart's birthday, and we got a reveal of a retro Owen Hart, which has the same problems as every other Owen Hart figure, in that there will always be one thing off about the head sculpt,
Yeah,
and the eyes look really weird. Everything else is pretty much right on
I think
in
just
terms of the
something
actual sculpt.
about the perspective sort of makes it look like he has a double chin. But yeah, definitely the eyes, and that's sort of what's sort of stopped me from buying it, at least right now. I mean, I think the pre-orders are up for what, another week?
Uh,
So
Week and a half, because I think 21st.
yeah, so
So in
maybe
the end,
I'll change my opinion on it, but um I don't know. I just feel like if Epic had Owen Hart, like honestly, I feel like maybe they would do a better job considering their style. Um yeah, I mean it's unfortunate. Like I obviously his work's really good, but to see an Owen Hart that, there's got issues with it, and I saw a lot of people complaining about it. It's just I wish it was just like a full home run.
even if it was a full-on home run, though, and I'll say this regardless of who makes it, there are
Oh,
always going
this
to be
will be
people that hate
yeah,
it because
well,
it's not a WWE figure.
yeah. There's
And
also people
this
that
one has
just
like the triple whammy of like the head looks a little weird. It's a zombie figure, and then you have the WWE like fanboy sentiment to it too.
yeah. Yeah, and some
I'm
with
gonna
those
get
people,
it.
it's a no-win situation with them. Um,
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see. I assume this wouldn't be the only Owen Hart. Maybe do like a pink attire. And we'll see what else he does.
I'm curious because it's a Pro Wrestling Tees exclusive, and
Right.
Pro Wrestling Tees also did a micro brawler of Owen in this same gear.
Hmm.
Pro Wrestling Tees obviously are the merch vendor for AEW. Can somebody please explain to me, like I'm fucking 3 years old, how Jazzwares can finally decide they want to do NWA Sting, and it's not even like you don't even have the New Japan argument for that. Maybe he wears that against Spivey in All Japan. It's been a couple of years since I've seen that match, which is funny because that got released last year on the Foreign Wrestler Selection Blu-ray, but I've actually not even watched most of that, so there that is. But like, why are we doing NWA Sting and kind of sort of trying to do WCW Crow Sting from that one promo picture, but we can't do one fucking Owen Hart in the King of Hearts gear?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I saw someone sort of not blame, but like suggest it was Martha Hart that blocked them from doing that at 10. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Come on. Like,
But here's the thing. She would have had to have approved this.
yeah, exactly. That's another thing.
And
Yeah.
all of the one shirt that I have that's a picture of him from fucking 1994.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have any problem acknowledging that part of Owen Hart's career. She just has a problem with WWE making money off of him.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this on the show ad nauseum. But if you're somebody who bitches about Martha Hart not wanting Owen to be licensed by the WWE, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
The no way around it. Just fuck you. That one guy on Twitter years ago that I saw, like, oh, this is how Martha acts. Owen probably jumped. Like, you deserve a brick to the back of the head.
Oh, that's awful.
Fuck you. Yeah, like that woman lost her husband because of the negligence of a wrestling promotion that you like. Go fuck yourself. But the eyes look weird on that figure. And also, we talked about this. There's been like the thing that happens a few times now with zombie figures where the hand painted prototypes look a little weird, and then we get like pictures or like the actual figures in hand and they look a little bit better. I'm hoping that happens here.
Yeah.
Because like Mike Awesome looked a little weird in the original prototype pictures, but the actual final figures, it's great. It's awesome. Haha. So
Yeah,
that's what I'm hoping for there.
My only problem with the Mike Awesome really was like the length of the arms.
Yeah, and I can say, having seen that in person, I think part of it is just the hands are so goddamn big.
Mm.
He's got Def Jam hands.
Got like a doll seam thing going on.
Yeah, like the length of the arms, like looking at it in person, I was like, that's probably all right. It's just the fucking hands are so huge.
I think
Which I
said
maybe go on.
My thing at the time was like you could take that upper body and just make the 6-inch scale with it.
Yeah, the arms. I still. I don't know. I want to see a 6-inch Mike Awesome.
Yeah.
From Zombie. I also. The tariff situation is fucking ridiculous, and everybody involved should be, in the U.S. side of things, should be fucking ashamed of themselves. I know Jeremy Padawer has like a little toy coalition, and they're lobbying for like 0% tariffs on toys, and like, buddy, that's not going to fucking happen.
Mm.
It's not, unfortunately. Grapplers and gimmicks at 1 a.m. for no fucking reason. Well, we know why he did this. Mitch showed a render of Raven in the Regium line, which somebody needs to have a talk with him about how like fucking bulky these torsos on everybody are. Raven was not that fat.
No.
Somebody asked like, why do you think he did this? And I was like, well, we've gone from Zombie doing the reactionary reveals to like Mitch just throws stuff up whenever Zombie shows something now. But to do this at like 1 a.m., like Thursday morning after the Owen reveal on Wednesday, that's so fucking weird. And also, he's mentioned he's not going into production on these things until the tariff situation has either been worked out or de-escalated. So why are you still showing renders? When the fuck are these going up? Where's Raven's tattoos?
I assume based on like the retros that the Raven would have his tattoos, it seems like it would seem really awkward and weird to not include them.
Yeah.
My only thought was like, is it like a situation where like they have to pay the artist or whatever? But I don't think Mitch would give a shit, judging by past figures. So
he showed a production sample of Jake Roberts. I don't think Mitch gives a shit about things like the law.
Oh no, that's never been his thing. So immediately I was like, no, that can't be it.
We did see the retro Jake, the heel one with the Cobra. This looks really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember when I started buying Hasbros again when I was like 11, I remember being kind of gobsmacked they didn't make a heel Jake.
Yeah, it's very long overdue.
Yeah, so like this is the kind of gap filler I'm all about. I just hope the Fed doesn't kibosh this. Also, that Cobra is goddamn huge.
They've had a chance to like kibosh a lot of stuff at this point, and they really haven't. So
That's
maybe they
true.
just don't care.
Yeah, or maybe it's just they don't want to go after a small company.
Yeah, it could be.
Because I think we've talked about this. Let AEW do a Jake Roberts in this attire in the Jazzwares line, and you're going to see the shit getting slung.
Yeah,
But then again, they did the Sting, so maybe
I don't know. It just,
maybe they don't care. I don't. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, they think of all the stuff that they could have done. Like they could have done the Taz and Jake Roberts. They could have done Anderson, on Anderson, not his son. Um, yeah, there's a lot of different things that they could have done and they haven't. And then with these Sting things, it's like, again, it's like, what can you do? What can't you do? It's so mixed messages. If they could do all eras of Sting, then I absolutely would. Like, give us like a '96 pre-crawl, brown hair, colorful attire thing. Give us everything. But like, I don't know. I wish Jazzwares would just go away at this point.
yeah. So I was going to mention this. I showed you those Spin Master WWE like pitch prototypes that have wound up on
Yeah.
eBay. I don't know when those were made, but swappable arms like the Ultimate Editions, you can tell by the Roman Reigns attire, it's sometime before like 2020.
Yeah.
So double jointed elbows and swappable arms and the diaphragm joint, these are all pre Ultimate Edition.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw people like, oh, these look like shit. Never mind the fact they're hand painted prototypes, and hand painted prototypes always end up looking, and a lot, not always, but in a lot of cases, end up looking demonstrably worse than the. Like, if you've ever seen a hand painted sample next to a finished sample, especially of a modern figure, it's unless it's like a really high end type deal, like a NECA figure, the hand painted prototype always looks like shit at the end.
Yeah, I mean, they could have gone through several revisions before the actual product came out.
Right. And the John Cena in particular, that is a better John Cena than anything Mattel has ever put out, just in terms of how accurate the body looks.
Mm-hmm.
And my one big take, well, my two big takeaways were one, goddamn, I wish we would have gotten these, because then we probably could have gotten a 3 3/4 inch line as well. But also, goddamn, AEW needs to get on the phone with Spin Master. Like,
Yeah.
I've seen those PlayStation figures and I've seen those 3 3/4 inch DC figures in person. They're really good. And I think I'd rather have those than Jazzwares just half-heartedly pushing out stuff that uses parts that Magic Olmas designed when he was just trying to get back into Mattel.
Yeah, I don't even see anyone say anything positive about the Jazzwares line at all anymore. I personally don't see them on shelves here. Like they've still got like Jungle Boy and Riho and stuff like that. Like we haven't got anything new in forever. It just seems like I can't imagine like they're making really anything off them at this point.
They seem to do somewhat well on ringside when it's a lineup that has like new figures. But like, yeah, that line feels really cold, and it's a shame because I have the unmatched 11 Will Ospreay, and that's an incredible fucking figure.
Yeah.
And like, I've said it a bunch. They've already had their homework done for them on the Supreme. Literally, just copy paste the Kenny Omega body and slap those Ospreay heads on. And congratulations, you have the best wrestling figure of the year. But like, yeah, I saw like almost no discussion of that Alpha Takeshita once it actually started shipping. I recently got that. It's awesome. It just feels, and the Supreme Moxley, for all the negative things I have and could say about John Moxley, that figure is awesome. It's one of the better Supreme figures they've ever done. It's the best Moxley they've ever done too. It's the most accurate in terms of like the body sculpt and everything.
Mm.
But it doesn't feel like anybody talked about it. That new Walmart Kenny Omega exclusive, other than the Supreme, it made, and even factoring in the Supreme, it may still be the best Kenny Omega Jazzwares has ever done. No talk about it at all. And it makes me wonder, like, what the fuck do they have to do? Because it seems like AEW's got a little momentum right now. The TV has been really, really fun recently. but like and they're also so sporadic with the releases because we just saw the golf cart 3-pack, which I thought was canceled because why the fuck wouldn't it be? But like this was supposed to be out fall of last year. We just saw the actual samples of it. And it's like, does anybody give a shit about owning this? Like that thing would have done gangbusters in like 2021.
Yeah, when
Maybe
the
even
figures are like
22.
so far behind, it's crazy.
Like I get wanting to do something that's like, here's this significant moment in AEW history because WWE does that stuff too. But like that moment was really cool to people during the fucking pandemic. And I know people are like weirdly nostalgic for Daily's Place era AEW. But when you think about the stuff that happened during that time period, do you really think about that?
I try not to think about any of it.
Because like when I hear Daily's Place AEW, I think like Winter is Coming 2020 with the Sting debut and the Omega title win,
Yeah,
or
that's
the
true.
Omega Phoenix title match, or the Exploding Barbed Wire shit show, or Revolution, which technically also, which was where the barbed wire match happened, but like technically Sting's match wasn't in Daily's Place, but it was on that show. Like I think about all of that stuff. I think about like I don't think about like fucking Stadium Stampede or like that Falls Count Anywhere match. I don't think about any of that stuff. Like I think about Eddie Kingston's debut against Cody, and I think about the matches with Moxley that Kingston had, and the return to like full capacity at Daily's Place at Double or Nothing 2021. I think about that when I hear about Daily's Place. I don't think about the goofy golf cart shit.
No, it's not something I've thought about, as you said, since it really happened. Obviously, it was like, I don't want to say trending on social media, but it was a big thing in wrestling circles. But yeah, then afterwards, it's not something anyone talks about today.
Yeah, and also another Daily's Place special I think of is the original Blood and Guts,
Yeah,
which up until Jericho got in the ring was fucking great. It was exactly what I wanted. And then, Jericho got in the ring and it got a lot worse. Funny how that works out. I don't understand the excitement around getting that. And they're not even excitement because I've seen like 4 people talk about it. And 3 of them were like, oh, yeah, this was 5 years ago. Title Run Toys mentioned they're doing an in-stock drop of the Jumping Bomb Angels, which, Jesus Christ, that's out of nowhere.
That's really cool, though. I mean,
oh, it is, yeah.
It's very cool to have something so original like that as opposed to doing like a goddamn another bulldog or some shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know how well they'd sell. Unfortunately, when I was a kid, I would get the best of the WWF tapes, and I remember watching Jumping Bomb Angels and Glamour Girls, and they were really great matches. I don't think they've been passed down to like newer generations of fans, which is really unfortunate. I saw one of the Jumping Bomb Angels at the first WrestleCon, and she didn't have anyone in her lineup. I thought it was kind of sad to see. But yeah, those matches were absolutely fantastic, and I hope it means the Glamour Girls aren't far behind, because that would be a nice 2 tag teams to have as part of a retro line.
Yeah. And also on note of like how they're going to sell, the way it's worded here is that it's going to be an in-stock drop, strictly limited, no re-releases, no restocks. Once they're gone, they're gone.
Yeah, that'll help.
No
then.
pre-orders. Yeah, I'm also, for anyone wondering kind of what the bodies are based on, God, I just brain farted. Norio Tateno, hers is kind of like the Shawn Michaels Rockers figure.
Yeah.
And Itsuki Yamazaki, she's also got the jumper pose, and I guess no, you know what? This is kind of like the Marty Jannetty pose too. So they're essentially just the Rockers in terms of the posing. Obviously, they're not reusing the Shawn and Marty molds because they can't.
Yeah,
I'm curious to see the sculpts for these.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really cool set to see. It's something that I couldn't have imagined anyone would make. Be cool if we could branch out into more like Japanese women's wrestling. Could we get like the Crush Girls or something? That'd be cool.
How angry do you think Bill McKenna was when he saw this?
He split his head open. I don't know.
He's the greatest designer of Japanese women's wrestling figures ever. That's his thing. Which, I'm happy for him. Maybe he could try to be the greatest designer of fucking Bret Hart figures ever, maybe.
Oh, that's never gonna happen.
No, and I might have said this last week, but like the Majors had a clip from their podcast calling the Mattel figures the greatest ever. And we talked about the 1990 Ultimate Warrior and that Hall of Champions box set. But can you explain something to me? How does the greatest wrestling figure line ever have a 1990 Ultimate Warrior head that looks worse than the Jakks Classic Superstars one from 21 years ago?
I can't explain that to you. I'm not involved, unfortunately. If I was, you'd be getting like a lot of weird shit, and we'd have like Crypt the Keeper. And I don't give a damn about Tales from the Crypt. I would make that 100%.
Can you imagine if I was in charge of that fucking line? How much better this whole thing would be?
Yeah,
an entire wave of Ray trailer figures.
We'd get Inoki in this homeless man gear.
Inoki with the cross.
With the mask from All Star Pro Wrestling.
Build a figure would be Inoki from his retirement match with Doc Fry.
Hey, if we get Inoki in the Master Saito, the Island Death match, that'd be cool.
That would be a Coliseum Collection 2-pack.
Hell yeah.
No, you know what? It would be an Ultimate Edition ring with those two. And we would use all the New Japan shit. And when New Japan sued, I would tell them to get fucked. We have these guys under Legends deals.
Character Products made that, didn't they? The Island Death match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's even got like one of the little like torch things. It might have two of them actually. I don't have that one.
I think it did, yeah.
That's such a fun match. Like, it's not something I would ever like throw into like my regular nostalgia rewatch rotation, but that match is a lot of fun. It's also, it's not something you could ever do again. I know they did the one with Hase and Tiger Jeet Singh, and that one's the one that's actually bad. The Inoki Saito one is a lot of fun.
I just love that they put it in All-Star. Like, it's not in any other wrestling game that ever exists. That's something that's very unique to that game.
Yeah, I've always wondered if that's just because it was like a New Japan game and they were like, oh, here's this thing we can do to show off the power of the PlayStation 2.
Yeah, probably.
Because you really couldn't have done the nighttime with like the fire and stuff. You couldn't have done that justice on the PS1, I don't think.
No.
Goddamn, do I wish that made it into like King of Colosseum.
Yeah, it'd have been cool.
Or fucking Wrestle Kingdom. Fuck.
Yeah.
See me playing fucking Jumbo Tsuruta versus Vader in an Island Death match if that shit would have been in Wrestle Kingdom too. But yeah, those jumping bomb angels are really interesting. Oh, go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say it would have been cool if they would have had like Kawasaki and Wrestle Kingdom based on their other arenas. That would have looked really cool.
Yeah, and especially because they put Onita and Hayabusa and
exactly
two, yeah. And like maybe because I remember Fire Pro Club. It actually, you were the one that made the post about Wrestle Kingdom 2. I'm pretty sure. That is you or Ryan C because the thread title was caps lock Holy Shit Wrestle Kingdom 2 and it got changed to Holy Showers Wrestle Kingdom 2.
That was probably me.
And I remember like everybody freaked the fuck out the night they announced because it was the night of the second Joe and Angle match in TNA. Because I was on the phone with my friend Sheaf, the pay-per-view ended. He was like a huge and still is a huge Hayabusa fan. Like he literally is like, okay, man, I'm gonna go to bed. I'll talk to you tomorrow. He hung up and I checked the Wrestle Kingdom 2 website, just like, let's see if they put anything up. And I saw Onita and Hayabusa and I sent him the link like caps, like, you need to wake the fuck up and see this. Because like I wasn't gonna call his fucking phone and be like, dude, go to the computer. Because like it was a school night. It was already 11 o'clock. But yeah, I always thought it was weird there was no death matches. I think there's like a sort of kind of shoot style rule set. So like they
Yeah.
did put that in there for like the Funaki and Maeda types, but I always thought it was weird. They had Hayabusa in there and then Onita. And it's that version of Onita too, which you wouldn't associate with like having actual fucking matches, like regular wrestling matches.
Mm.
And there's no
It,
barbed wire.
yeah, it's still interesting to think that's the only licensed appearance of Hayabusa in a wrestling game, even though I think they had like Hayabusa clothing in All Star Pro Wrestling 3.
I think they did, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, technically, there's a game that has them licensed, but I don't want to be accused of being a bully. So,
Wait,
not
what?
that you would do it, but UPW,
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the only release game anyway.
the only game that's going to be released.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're flying
Uh,
too close to the sun. Yeah,
yeah. Icarus is going
I'm just
down.
doing a bit. I'm just doing a bit. Um, but yeah, those jumping bomb angels are really cool. It's interesting to see Japanese talent coming into some of these
Yeah.
retro figure lines. And I remember when Onita got announced because I was still halfway reading wrestling figs. It might have been wrestling figs. It might have been like the major pod group, but there was like a couple of people that were excited, and the rest were like, "I don't know who this is. Nobody's gonna buy him. Go fuck yourself."
Like
Like
even if you don't know who it is, there's people that do. And what is wrong with having more original figures that you wouldn't have never thought of before? There's always someone
these
out there
people
that's
don't know
interested.
anything about wrestling is the problem.
Ah, yeah.
I'm curious to see if Epic ever do circle around to doing a deluxe Hayabusa because I remember in one of their Q and A's I was like, "Hey, since you did the new Onita, how about Hayabusa?" And they were like, "Oh, that's a possibility." And I'd kind of like to throw my Cella Hayabusa in the dumpster. So if they would fucking, well, not in the dumpster, I wouldn't do that. That's bad. But like, I would absolutely donate it to the toy department the next time I go down with the very little amount of my collection I have left. But like, I'd like to get a Hayabusa to go. Well, I don't even have that Onita, but I would certainly hunt it down if they would make a new
Oh,
Hayabusa.
I have that Onita and it rules. Um, I think that Onita uses the Jake mold, right? Or the Jake stance, I
It's
should say,
based
I guess.
on, yeah,
Because I was thinking that would work for Hayabusa too, because it kind of works as like the Falcon Arrow in a way.
yeah. I'm weird in that I kind of want to see the Epic Hayabusa be a shrunk down version of the old FMW figure,
Right. Okay. Yeah.
like with the pose. I think that would look really cool. Um, I I want them to resist the urge to do him as a jumper again. I get it, but like, goddamn.
Honestly, someone should hire Astrid from Twitter and have them make molds for Hayabusa and work off that.
Mm. I don't know who it is that does Epic's sculpts now, but they're very good.
Yeah, they're great.
And also that Onita is apparently still in stock on figure collections for anyone wondering.
Yeah, it's a great figure if you're interested in it. Definitely pick it up. I think at some point they'll probably release a bloody variant. I mean, they talked about it.
Oh, apparently both Bobby Heenans are on
Also,
figure
a
collections
tremendous
right now as
figure.
well. Yeah, I like the black jacket one more.
I just picked up the red because it was the one that was coming out first, so I was like, yeah, why not?
Yeah, the red jacket one's awesome too. Both of those are fucking way better than
Oh yeah,
the Mattel Retro that's coming. That
yeah.
thing is insulting. I also like that the black jacket Heenan is like very clearly like announcer Heenan, and the
Hmm.
red jacket one's like manager Heenan.
Yeah.
I also forgot that they did that Halloween Havoc Eddie, which is funny because I think I bitched about it for like months on the podcast.
They should do like a track jacket Heenan from when like you managed Mr. Perfect
That would be really cool.
with a towel.
I wish Kurt Hennig could have like the CMG brand deal going on.
Yeah, I don't think any of his, from what I remember, any of his Mattel figures have really hit the spot. I feel like, if he could be with someone else, obviously like Zombie, if we could get like a 6-inch Kurt Hennig from him would be super cool, but I don't see it happening, unfortunately. I think his son still works in WWE, right?
I don't think he still works there, but I think he recently did an interview saying his dad has a Legends deal now.
I thought he was like a producer still.
Maybe. I don't know how I feel about like modern guys that didn't go super high on the card being producers, though. That's because isn't the whole idea like you're teaching people how to get over and stuff?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I've never really understood the system.
Yeah, like when I see like Kenny Dykstra as an agent, I'm just like, okay, he
I
he
just saw
was
that.
around a long time ago.
Yeah, that Josh Matthews is a producer in AEW. I was like, what? When did that happen?
He was the guy that I wanted to win Tough Enough because I saw him do like a moonsault and I was like, oh, he's all right. And then I got blocked on Twitter by him like 10 years ago for making fun of him for being in TNA when the paychecks were being missed. Because why are you being such a mark on Twitter, bro? Bob Ryder's not going to get you a big increase on your contract, but they're not paying anybody.
He's married to Madison Rain, right?
Yeah, which is that was probably his end.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, good on him. He has a paying job in the wrestling industry.
Yeah.
Do you remember the really fucked up tweet Michael Cole sent to him once?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so like beyond the moonsault on Tough Enough, when I think of Josh Matthews, I just think of that really fucked up Michael Cole tweet and like
Mm-hmm.
how the fuck did he not get in trouble? Well, he's Michael Cole. They're not going to punish him because Vince loves him. But
Well,
like,
it was also like the early days of Twitter. Didn't he have like sensitivity training or something?
maybe because that's the same year as well. I have a CM Punk rant to go on anyway, but that was the same year as Punk said that thing, and Glad got mad about it, and that was during the Summer Punk angle. So WWE was like, "Oh, it's okay, we're not renewing his contract," and then obviously they did.
Mm.
Um, yeah, what a shit company. I hate that I have nostalgia for that shit, like WWF stuff in general. Uh, but
I
that's,
mean,
I
that's
guess,
all
part
right.
and parcel of not being able to shake the fucking sickness of being a
Well,
wrestling fan. But
you don't. Yeah, I mean, you grow up with that stuff, and also you don't have to like every era of a company, right?
no, but it was also weird. I was at the lake yesterday and I took a bump. I cut my hand,
Oh
and
yeah.
I, I guess so. Like I'm out there on the rocks, and I'm like, I'm gonna sit down. And as I brace myself to sit down, my foot gets caught between two bigger rocks. I don't realize this as I'm going to sit down, but because my foot is stuck, my ass is nowhere near the biggest part of the rock. So when I sit down, I just take a bump. Foot still caught between the rocks. No clue how I didn't break my fucking ankle. But like I lay there for a second and I laughed, and my cousin's like, "You all right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good." And I stood up and I'm like, "Oh, my foot got caught. That's what happened here." And I noticed a couple of seconds later, like my middle finger right at the bottom on the inside of my hand got cut, and it bled pretty good. Um, and then I noticed a little bit later that like, oh, my like shin got cut in a couple of places. That's fun too.
You should stop going to this league. You're gonna end up like Ray Brower from Stand By Me.
No, no, I'm gonna keep going. We're gonna see how bad this gets.
Want to see a dead body?
My sunburn from a couple of weeks ago on the part that was on like my right forearm. I want to say it's peeling, but it's not. It's kind of just like flaking, and it's really annoying because it's like just there in
Yeah.
the like hair on my forearm, and I want it to stop being there. But I'm not gonna shave my forearms because that's weird. Why would I do that? I'm not working for fucking Watts or anything. Like I'm not trying to put a polite chin lock on anyone. So I'm assuming it'll just take care of itself. But yeah, so last night, right around the time I was getting ready to go to bed, somebody sent me I guess it's the ad for the new Saudi show, but they sent me a Twitter link and I can't watch the videos because I'm not logged in. But I guess CM Punk is shown in the ad for the Saudi show. And it sure is interesting to listen to CM Punk fans and listen, out of the people on both sides of that thing in AEW, I like him way more than I like the Young Bucks or Jack Perry or Cole Cabana for that matter. But like, they didn't make him fucking shit on the company right after he won the belt. They didn't make him get into a fucking altercation with Jack Perry. He did that shit himself. Because Phil Brooks is a whiny little bitch that will only start fights with people that he thinks he can actually take. That's kind of the thing. And yeah, putting a front face lock on Jungle Boy, that's really funny. Like, haha, you beat up Jungle Boy. But like, you also lost your fucking job and had to go crawling back. But he always wanted to go back to WWE. He never wanted to be in AEW. He always wanted to go back because, like his hero Bret Hart, he's a fucking mark. I mean, the Fed didn't kill Punk's, sibling and fuck over his family and do all these other horrible things to him personally. They fired him on his wedding day. I love how that was like, that was like the event horizon for him. Like, what a fucking loser. And, like, oh, go suck a blood money covered dick. His words to the Miz in like 2019. And I guess Punk's going to go see what that's like now too.
Well, the only thing I'll say is like, it's possible that was an error in the ad. Like, I don't know. I mean, if he does work, it will be very funny considering all the things he has said. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, what can you say? This is the guy who went to AEW, said, "I'm back in pro wrestling," and he said, what do you say to MJF that time? You can work night
You
two.
can go and headline night one of a buy two get one free extravaganza.
Yeah, it's funny because people put him on a higher pedestal compared to others in regards to comments like that, and he's doing exactly what he said, basically what he was against. So, what can you say? He's a pro wrestler at the end of the day.
Yeah, but it's also the Bret Hart thing where people try to pretend he's more principled than others.
Yeah, I get
And
what you mean.
the Bret stuff especially drives me fucking insane. Like, oh, my hero Bret Hart, which by the way, dog, you're a dude that's my age. Stop talking like that. The Andrew Dice Clay guy, but like, oh, my hero Bret Hart was right about corpses like McMahon. Oh, the same corpse that he fucking went back to multiple times after they did all that shit to his family. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he
Okay.
still makes appearances for them now. I mean, he did last year, right?
He was at Mania, was he not? He was the Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah, that's right. Well, I didn't watch that, so I completely forgot all about it. But yeah, I mean,
And
he's still very much involved.
like, he fucking took money from Rob Feinstein multiple times, including recently.
Yeah.
Like right around the time that tweet was made, he did a fucking live signing with RF, and it's like, how the fuck are you gonna argue this guy's morally like superior to anyone? He's as much of a fucking carny loser. Like that tweet came around the same time as like, oh well, Steve Austin went crawling back to Vince like everybody else does. Yeah, and Austin didn't do it nearly as fucking like how do I put this? Nearly as pathetically as Brett did. Brett fucking came back because don't put out a DVD calling me a mark. Austin did it because he just wanted to make money.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus Christ, I can at least respect fucking Austin be like, fuck it, I'll come back and do business. The Brett thing, I can't. Like, no, don't bury my footage and call me a mark. Okay, well, they didn't bury your footage, but you proved you're a mark. Jesus Christ, man. I just, God, I don't know. You know what fucking, you know what, like, aspect of professional wrestling, you know where in the world you don't have to deal with this shit? Japan. Because people will just blow up fucking relationships and then just be cool with each other again because there's money to be made.
That's true.
You don't have anybody being like, look how morally superior I am. It's just Choshu bitching about Inoki giving Chono the book and like, I'm never going to work there again. And then he works there again.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, Morals never get into the conversation of Japanese wrestling.
No, you have guys accused of like fucking Kentaro Kanemaru, for Christ's sake. He got booked after he did some real awful shit.
Hase, that's just gone completely under the rug.
Yeah. Yeah. Kensuke Sasaki killed 2 different fucking rookies. I mean, he doesn't really like get booked anywhere anymore, but like
He had still
he
like a
was
lasting career and was seen as a legendary figure.
he literally was around for like 10 years as a semi-active worker after the fucking guy in World Japan died, and they blamed it on fucking Kenzo Suzuki.
Yeah.
Like, goddamn, man. I don't feel nearly as scummy like watching Japanese wrestling, even if I know the people are like fucking like terrible. Like, my favorite wrestler is Antonio Inoki, and he hung out with like dictators and shit. He was cool with people in North Korea,
Yep. I mean,
and that's still my favorite wrestler.
one of my favorites is Onita, and like,
Oh
dude's
god,
scummy as
yeah.
shit.
He's a little bit of a horrible person.
Yeah, exactly. But
But
he
it
doesn't
never
pretend
enters
he's a
into the
good.
conversation.
I suppose maybe in his promos he pretended was a good person, but like, I don't know that. I never translated them.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And then when he went to New Japan, it definitely wasn't like this guy's a nice person. It was Mr. Liar.
Yeah. Also, I don't know if this is going to matter to anyone, but there is a new All Japan Classics show that is a half an hour longer. And I feel like I've talked about this before, but I finally saw the first episode of this recently. And I really, really just hate that they put clipped matches in that take up like a half an hour of the show when we could
Yeah.
just get 2 hours of complete matches. God damn it. Um, I wish VOP would get on the Blu-ray bandwagon like New Japan's DVD house. I know I say that all the time, but like I look at that Inoki Blu-ray and I'm like, just do a digital remaster of the Kobashi ones,
Yeah.
please. Like, do both the Kobashi sets together as one set. Because I think the 2 Kobashi DVDs, if you add them up, are I think probably still less discs than the Inoki 50th anniversary DVD box. Because I want to say that one's 20 discs and the Blu-ray is going to be 10. I
Not
don't
that
know.
I
I
could
just
ever
want
afford them, but yeah, do it.
I want more. I want more Japanese commercial releases coming out, especially like there's no reason to sit on this fucking footage.
I
Like,
want like
what are you?
not just like New Japan and Old Japan, but like some indies and stuff. I'd love to see that stuff like in the highest quality footage possible.
M-Pro was still putting out like DVDs of their shows as of a few years back,
Yeah, I got that
but
one
I
from
don't know how easy
'99.
those. Yeah, but I mean, like the 2 Sumo Hall shows, I think got semi recent commercial releases too.
Oh, did they? Okay.
I think. And like a bunch of UWFI tapes got done as DVDs and they look amazing.
That's right, yeah.
It would be nice to see, you know, Blu-rays of this stuff. And like, where are the WAR DVDs? Where the fuck are the 01 DVDs?
That Quest TV channel had like a WAR like preview or something. It was like a 3-minute video, but the on-demand website doesn't have any WAR on it, just UWFI.
I think Quest was the company that put out the UWFI DVDs.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I know that there are WAR DVDs now that I think about it though, because I have a Blu-ray compilation of the DVD sets that were made by I want to say they were made by the same guy that did the complete 0201 set that I have. I want to say at least.
Is that in that hidden group?
No, that 01 set can actually be bought on IVP videos, I think. Because I
Oh,
think
okay.
he bought that set from them. Um The WAR set I got on Crazy Max, but I don't think the guy that put those sets out is like actively involved anymore because he was doing a Danielson complete career comp and he got to like a fourth volume and he stopped doing physical discs. He was like, I can send you the Blu-ray ISO. And I'm like, I'll have a burner. So that's fucking no good. And I guess he got like threatened with a legal letter from Rob Feinstein because he was using RF footage, which is rich when you consider that RF was bootlegging fucking pay-per-views and Pride shows
Yeah.
and got sued for it. But that guy put out some really cool stuff. He also, I have a bunch of like mid to late 2010s WWE like fan cams that he recorded, and these were recorded like with a 4K camera and then mastered in 1080. They look unfucking believable. It's just a real shame it's that era of WWE and there's like nothing worth noting. I do have an NXT house show from I want to say like Atlanta with Roderick Strong versus whatever the fuck Kenta's Hideo Itami.
Yeah.
I don't know if they ever had a match on TV, but they had a match at a house show and I've seen it and it was good. A good little match. Was there really no other wrestling figure news this week? Am I just completely overlooking some bullshit? Has Latuni shown anything?
No, there was that oh, ooh, it's Matt. It was Matt Maniacs, right? What is it called? Like
Oh yeah,
Grand.
the Earl Hebner.
Yeah, they Earl Hebner and Paul Ellering. They showed off recently.
So are
I
they
mean,
reissuing the Road Warriors?
I heard that they were unhappy with the paint on Hawk, and people just started getting replacements in the mail without any knowledge of it, which that's pretty cool. That they were just sending replacements to people. Um, I'm not really into those figures, but I do think it's pretty cool that somebody started their own original line. You know, they're not retros; they're its own thing. So I think that's a pretty cool thing.
They look cool, yeah. It's another form factor.
My biggest problem is that they still post their own customs on the Instagram. That's like sometimes it's confusing. It's like who do you have and who don't you have? And why are you doing that if you're a proper business now?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like that because I saw, I think, Andre recently, and I
Yeah,
was just like, oh, well, look at that. Oh, so they have the pre-order open for the wave with the Hardys and the Powers of Pain and the majors, but also navigating this website is like a complete fucking pain in the ass. The Powers of Pain look cool, but they don't look 64.99 cool.
yeah,
And that's another thing, like the tariff surcharges that are going to start being added to everything. That's going to limit a lot of what I buy this year. Like, we can talk about this. We saw Storm Arena Ken, which is on its way to the US now. 26.99 on Big Bad, but that excludes the tariff surcharge, which could be, I think I saw up to 40% of the price,
Jesus Christ.
which would make that figure like $38. So like that's still pretty all right. Like, okay. But then you tax shipping on top of that, and it's like I'm still probably in on the Street Fighter figures, but that's gonna make me think twice about the Darkstalkers and the King of Fighters ones. Um, but we saw the Ken and we also saw the packaging. If you're familiar with Storm Collectibles, it's that kind of like the nice, clean window box packaging. It's got like a little flap up top with like a peg hole so you can put it on shelves at like an actual retail store. I love the Jada packaging, like the idea of it, but it's very hard to put those things on a bookshelf because of how like big the front is. So you can't get as many on a shelf. You won't have that problem here. Another bonus is that everybody's going to have their picture on the side, so you won't. If you're like me and you're an idiot, I have my Street Fighter figures up, but I don't remember who's who until I pull the box out. That won't be an issue here with the Storm ones because there will be like a character picture on the one side. This figure looks amazing. Uh, like it blows the Jada figure out of the water. I know they're going for two different versions of Ken, but like I just the sculpting and the articulation and the posability on the Storm figures is crazy compared to even the Jada figures, which I thought were like the new standard for 1/12 scale at like that $25 price point, but the Storm figures look even better. It's crazy.
Yeah,
I need to get Jada though.
I wish you could just get them in store.
Yeah. My understanding is Storm had distribution through a company called Bluefin, and they lost Bluefin, which is why everything is Big Bad Toy Store exclusive now, which, in happier times when the trade war wasn't going on, that's cool because it's Big Bad Toy Store. They're very reliable. They take a little bit longer to get stuff in, but they're incredibly reliable. And now I don't know. We might be getting like a $10 charge added to those figures. And also this opens up the question of like, what the fuck is Sagat gonna cost before any sort of surcharge?
Oh god, I don't even want to think about it.
Because I can't imagine the base price for him is going to be too hateful. Like probably 35, which like we've seen what that figure looks like. That's okay. But that also means if you get like a 40% surcharge, that's like a $50 figure close to a $50 figure before shipping. And again, I'd still probably pay it because quality of the figure. But like, I saw Kyle Peterson put up a video like, where do we go from here with collecting? And for a lot of people, like I imagine budgets are going to be tighter for this kind of stuff because if you're ordering off the internet, you're essentially going to be paying that surcharge regardless. Prices are probably going to go up at Walmart too. So unless you have like a considerable amount of disposable income, I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of figure collecting going on for the foreseeable future unless this gets sorted.
Yeah, it's going to be the end for a lot of people.
And it's going to be the end for companies too.
Yep, for sure.
And I know the orange dumb fuck said like, "Oh, we made progress yesterday," but like,
The progress will be lost in like, give it 2 days and the progress will be lost.
Yeah, and I saw like some stuff. Like somebody pointed out, like his rhetoric has gotten a lot softer about that stuff the closer they got to these trade talks, because people are starting to figure out they got sold a bill of goods, and it's like that's great. They still voted him in.
Yep.
We still have 3.5 more years of this shit, and like even if they reach like a reasonable tariff on these, the damage is still done. So many of these companies are just holding inventory in China until the stuff gets fucking sorted out. And I don't know. I mean, I'm fine with switching to like collecting old magazines or collecting like physical media because I already did that like 2 years ago, and I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna buy Criterion Blu-rays. I'll do that shit again. That's not a big deal.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't
But
know what effect it's going to have on us. I haven't really paid too much attention to it. Right now, at least the base prices are the same. But we'll see what happens going forward. I don't really know.
I want everything to work out, and I know it's not going to, and that sucks. I also
Yep.
I did not buy my comics this week. I'm going to buy. I'm basically going to pay for last week and this week's comics at the same time this week, which is going to be a hoot because when I go to the comic shop, I'm going to have 3 weeks worth of shit to pick up, and I'm going to have to carry 3 big ass bags out of the building.
I've got Kingdom Come coming on Monday.
Nice. I'm looking forward to reading that. And then, of course, the following week, I have a bunch of books coming in. I've probably talked about this recently, but I'm really trimming down the amount of things I hit add to cart on Comic Hub. Because I can't have as big of a pull list as I do. I can't add everything that I think is cool to my cart on that. I can't. That's silly.
Did you see
So I'm
the
dialing. Oh, go on.
Did you see the Peacemaker trailer, by the way?
No, honestly, I've just resigned to avoid anything involving John Cena.
Ah, okay. It looks
Also,
good.
I saw a report that Creature Commandos, speaking of James Gunn DC stuff, I saw Creature Commandos was listed as April 29th, but I can't find any evidence that that shit actually came out
Oh,
on
you mean like a
Blu-ray.
new? Oh, no, I haven't heard anything about a Blu-ray. I know they just released, I think, like all the episodes except for one on YouTube recently. But no, I haven't heard anything about a Blu-ray.
I want to say it was that physical media page, the one that put up the X-Men 97 coming to 4K, and
Mm,
then has said nothing about it since then. They're usually pretty reliable, is my understanding, but like I looked on like the Blu-ray.com forum, and apparently there was a listing on a Canadian website, but like nobody said anything about if that shit's like still coming, if it was ever actually planned for a release. And that's a big misstep, I think, on any of these companies doing like animated shows. The kind of people that are really into those shows are the kind of dorks that'll buy physical fucking media.
yeah.
Like maybe actually do something to appease us, possibly. It may help in the long run. Also, another thing, I've been playing more of the 100 line. I suspect I will have the game finished by the time the day is through. Incredible game. Great story. I'm a huge fan of everything. Also, I had maybe accidentally spoiled the fucking the ending of the game for myself. And I had some theories about some of the characters, and I don't know if anybody listening to this plans to play the game, so I won't go too deeply into anything. But like, I got to the part where the pro wrestler girl showed up, and I kind of figured out the deal with her immediately. And then once it happened, I was like, "Aha! You can't fucking fool me. I've watched anime. I've read manga. I know how this is gonna end." And like, just some of the weird ways like some of the characters acted early on that I kind of just wrote off as like maybe just like being weird, annoying like characters. Like now, like having seen kind of sort of some of the stuff that happens, like yeah, no, that I should have saw that coming. I wish there were more battles in the game because the actual like SRPG aspect of the game is so much fun. It incentivizes, I think I said this last week, it really incentivizes like aggressive play, and it's just so goofy and over the top because all the invader characters are just like they're like bright, happy, like squishmallow looking things, and you're just like fucking hacking them to pieces. And then here come the commanders, and they look like like a third stage fucking Dynasty Warriors boss or some shit. And some of them also just look like really demonic, like fucked up Pokemon too. And like for a game that has such a weirdly like bright, happy kind of aesthetic, to have that like level of violence attached to it. And also there was like a scene where like one of the invaders played this like music that turns the like visual novel aspect into something that looks nothing like the game did previously. All the characters are redrawn. The dialogue is weird. It's like bright and happy, like a regular like teenage like visual novel kind of game would be. And then your character snaps out of it. Like all of the voice acted stuff is really cool. I do get a little annoyed when the story stuff goes a little longer because sometimes I do just want to run around the school and like craft a gift for one of the classmates or like go and upgrade like the weapons or whatever. But God, what a fucking that game is a monument to like maximalist video game design. Apparently the script is like 6 million words, and it's part of the reason why some countries didn't localize the game.
That's understandable.
Like those I can kind of see how the hell they went into debt making that game. That is an everything at the fucking wall to see what sticks kind of game. And I know like some people are asking for it to be ported to the PlayStation, and that's fair. that game needs to be played by more people. It's on Steam. It's on Switch. If you don't have a Steam Deck, that game could probably run on like a mid-level computer. It is not super graphically intensive. It's such a great game. I would highly recommend it. And it also makes me really sad that like if that company goes under, I mean the lead devs will probably just start another one because that's how it works.
Yeah.
But like I want to see them do another game like this. Not another game like another visual novel with the strategic RPG gameplay because I didn't realize how much I needed a game like this until I saw the trailer for it after reading like an article about it, and I was like, "Oh, this is like so far up my alley. It's not even funny." And like, honestly, if you're a wrestling fan, the game is worth it just to play far enough in to see the pro wrestler character because there's some references in there that I don't think they can legally make.
Huh.
There's references to Hell in a Cell and Wrestle Kingdom.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
Like she literally says Hell in a Cell and literally says Wrestle Kingdom. And there's also some like really fucking funny, like maybe possible kind of sort of misusings of certain wrestling terms like heel and kayfabe, which
Huh.
I'm assuming is more of a localization thing than anything else. But yeah, that game fucking kicks ass. I also heard that the Doom the Dark Ages may not run super duper well even on the PS5 Pro.
Oh, that sucks.
And yeah, I saw some stuff about like it being tried on like the ROG Ally because apparently the person that was I think it was Deck Wizard couldn't get it to run on the Steam Deck. So like, yep, can't play the new Doom game unless I buy an $800 PlayStation. Oh wait, I can't even play it then because apparently it runs like shit there too.
Jesus. So probably it's a day
Yeah, we're
one patch.
hopefully,
I saw that
hopefully, but Jesus, we're cooked.
I saw that the Mad Metal game, like the Mad Max inspired car combat game had a demo released the other day, so I'll have to download that.
Yeah, yeah, I hope that runs on the deck.
Yeah.
I I know we talked about the GTA 6 trailer last week. I went back and watched it with the sound on because I when I saw it, I was in the break room at work and I couldn't have the sound on. And I gotta tell you, buddy, I am no more interested in that game now than I was when I first saw that trailer.
So
I also
the
don't own a platform it's going to run on, so
the big discussion on Twitter recently was couch physics. That when they sat on the couch, the cushions moved. And I was just like, what are we doing here? Like, all I care about is if the game was fun. I don't give a shit about that shit. Like, I thought this was Vice City, not Van City. Like, why do I care about a goddamn couch? You know, it's the discussions regarding it are really ridiculous. And like, I, I get that it's GTA and GTA is incredibly popular. I just don't get the hype with a new entry. Like, it's just very strange to me. You know,
yeah.
it's like okay, I've played every GTA game. It's like what when I think about a new GTA game, I'm like, what innovations could they truly offer? And like, I can't think of anything. Like, I think it's just going to be like very much the same gameplay wise. I mean, there's going to be more indoor locations you can go into, but like, really, what is going to be the big change? And I can't think of anything. Like, it's going to be your standard GTA style gameplay. So I don't know. I don't really understand the hype. Like I said, I know GTA is popular, incredibly popular, but I don't think it's warranted at this point.
That game is going to have an unbelievably inflated budget and they're 100% they're going to break even within like 3 days of launch. But what if they don't?
Hmm.
What happens if Grand Theft Auto is the one thing that doesn't make money hand over fist? Then fucking what?
Then we're done.
Yeah, like I don't care about graphical fidelity or like couch physics. I heard the main character girl has jiggle physics, which that's great. It's the early 2000s again. Let them bounce. I don't care. I don't care about cutting edge hardware at this point. I just want something that I
No.
can play and it doesn't drive me up the fucking wall, which is why I thought like Switch 2 and then I saw the price.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll probably still get the Switch 2 at some point, but like with the way everything's going right now, I'm not real convinced it's going to be anytime soon. And also, all of the third-party games being fucking game key cards. Fuck you.
Yeah, it's the obsession with graphics that is killing the industry, really, because it forces everyone to spend the most money and then they don't goddamn make a penny off of it. It's just insane to me, like the discussions that people are having. I just don't get it at all. To me, it's like, is it fun to play? Is the most important thing. You know, it's like I don't know. I don't give a shit about graphics. I don't care. I'm
I
honestly more
find the
interested.
technological. Oh, go on.
I'm honestly more interested, and I've seen less of it than GTA 6, but Mind's Eye that comes out in like 3 weeks or whatever. Because that's also like GTA, but at least it's a sci-fi setting, so it's something different. As opposed to like, we're going back to Vice City, and honestly too, like setting a game in modern day America just sounds depressing. Like I'd on
Yeah.
I want to honestly play another game in like the 80s or 90s, even late 90s than modern day.
Yeah. I just. Yeah. I saw the pictures of the leaked Xbox handheld, which looks like a ROG Ally that has like the GameCube controller handles on each side.
Yeah.
So this isn't the Xbox handheld that Microsoft are making themselves. That's still a couple of years away. And that's going to be apparently like a true next generation Xbox handheld, whatever that entails, whatever that means. Chipset here is stronger than the Steam Deck. Whether or not that translates into it being able to do more modern games in a satisfactory manner, who the hell knows? I know that Ninja Gaiden 2 Black that came out this year, a lot of people were like, you can get somewhat steady performance out of this on the Steam Deck. And then I saw like it was either a Legion Go or a ROG Ally video of it, and it didn't look significantly better, like it wasn't 60 FPS or anything, but it looked like markedly better than the fucking Steam Deck. And I love my Steam Deck. It's my favorite purchase I've ever made for anything in my life with my own money. But you can't play anything current on it. Like, how do I put this? I mean, you can play WWE 2K, but WWE 2K also is not the most graphically taxing video game on the market.
No. It's been the
But
same for years now.
if you want to play like Spider-Man 2, which I don't know why you would, but you're not going to get reasonable performance out of that on Steam Deck. That Ninja Gaiden game, you're not going to get reasonable performance out of it. That Clear Obscure game, apparently, you can kind of sort of get some decent performance on the Steam Deck, but that's also a turn-based RPG. You don't even need 45 FPS out of that. Like as long as it isn't so bad that you can't do the turn-based aspect of the gameplay properly, then you'll be fine. But like 2022 onward, it's a real struggle to get some of those games to run. Like I'm glad Hi-Fi Rush runs really well, but that's also not a graphically intensive game
Yeah.
because it looks like an early Xbox game. And I wish
How
we would
long
get back to that.
if when Steam Deck 2 comes out, like how long is that going to last before that's dated as well?
Yeah, that's another thing that I've thought about because Valve seems adamant they're not going to do a second Steam Deck until they can get a next gen leap in terms of performance, but also have more efficient battery life.
Yeah.
Maybe if the Switch 2 proves that you can get there, maybe if the ROG Ally 2, the Lenovo Legion Go 2, if they prove you can get there, maybe that'll nudge Valve forward. I mean, I can't imagine you're still selling Steam Deck 1 as your main thing in like 2026.
No. I mean,
Because at that point, it's going to be badly aged.
yeah. For me, I mean, sometimes I'll put like older games on it, but for me now, it's mostly just an emulation system.
That's what it is for me 95% of the time.
Yeah.
I had hope that like Star Wars Zero Company might be a game that could potentially run on the Steam Deck. I don't have high hopes after seeing the trailer, especially like those cinematics. Your Steam Deck's gonna fucking sound like a, I don't know, like a dying jet engine or some shit. Like mine doesn't ever really get super duper loud, but it'll get loud.
Yeah,
And
same.
that's why I'm glad the 100 line is the kind of game that it is, because you can play that game for a while and it doesn't fuck your battery up too much.
Hmm.
But yeah, I've said a bunch on the show. I think the future is in like the designer handheld like space for video games. I think you're still going to have your dedicated consoles because it's like a 50-year thing at this point. It's too deeply ingrained. But I think the Steam Deck's been a surprising success relative to what you would expect that thing to do just based on other handheld gaming PCs. But like the Switch proved people want something they can take with them, and everybody else is rushing to get in on the market. That handheld PS6 that might not be able to natively play PlayStation 6 games, what's the point?
Exactly.
It might not be able to natively play all PS5 games as well as the PS5 plays them. What's the point? And I'm honestly, out of the three, like Switch 2 is the one I'm probably most likely to buy just based on price point. The one I'm most interested in is the Xbox one. Because what does Phil Spencer mean when he says next generation leap in terms of like anything? Like next generation compared to what, the Steam Deck or the Switch 2? Next generation compared to what, the Xbox Series S or the Series X? Like what exactly is being put into the handheld that Microsoft is developing themselves?
Milo.
And like, does anybody buy the next Xbox? I mean, they're putting Gears of fucking War on the PlayStation.
Yeah, when you sent me that, I was like,
Granted,
"What's the big deal?" Because like they already made the Ultimate Edition. This seems ridiculous. And then I was like, "Oh yeah, they actually never made that for the PlayStation." So that's the big deal.
and it's not available on Steam either.
Oh, the Ultimate Edition isn't?
Nope, because I tried to buy it once I got my Steam Deck and once I got like really into Gears
Oh, that's
Tactics.
right. Yeah, it's on the Xbox store. I I'm sure I've talked about it, but I tested that game before it came out, before it was announced. Um,
Huh.
yeah, that was when somebody took screenshots of it and kept their username in, and it was all over like Kotaku and stuff. Idiots.
Yeah, they did that with the EA Sports UFC 5 beta. Like my username kept like bouncing all over the screen, and like the only way I could have took screenshots is if I took them off my phone. And I'm not stupid enough to post that shit publicly. Like you and I both had the Fight Forever review copies, and like there may or may not have been a lot of people that got a lot of screenshots sent to them by me, but I didn't post them shits publicly until we were legally able to. I don't even know if it would have violated anything. I don't think we could have got in trouble for it, but
It's not
like
like we signed any NDAs or anything.
no. No, we just got like a guide for covering the game, and I don't think either of us read it.
I didn't get that.
Oh, it was in the link when we got the codes. It was like there was
Oh,
the code, and if you scrolled down further, there were like the press assets and shit.
didn't you give me the code? I can't remember now.
No, I gave Jen your handle or something and said like my
Oh,
friend will be DMing you, or I gave her your email.
okay.
But yeah, I honestly I didn't get any further in that email past the code until like months after. I was like, I wonder what else. Oh yeah, they're a guide for game coverage. Okay.
I just
Well,
remember I was in my shitty apartment at the time, and the internet was there was terrible, and I had to spend like literally all day downloading it and playing it at like 12 o'clock at night.
I had to go to work the day that I got that code. Like I had it downloaded, and I interviewed for like a fucking radio job in my hometown, like literally a couple of blocks from where I live. That's not even a couple. It's like 2 or 3 streets over. Four. Yeah, whatever. Who cares? And I'm on the phone doing like the phone interview while I'm playing like my first match as Cody. And like I hung up from that conversation. I'm like, oh my gosh, we got a review copy. We're in. And it's the only review copy we've gotten to this day. So shout outs to THQ Nordic.
Yes, indeed.
I had a lot of fun with that game, and then I got really frustrated with that game. I also haven't played that game in months. So
Oh, me either.
yeah. I mean, if I ever get the hankering to play a game with Kenny Omega, that's probably the one I'll pick up because I like the move animations and stuff in that game. But it's not something I feel the need to play a whole lot. It also, like, AEW TV being more enjoyable again, it frustrates me because look at all the people that are on TV permanently featured now that are not in that game and have no chance of ever being added to that game.
Yeah, honestly, I have Kenny mods in 2K25 and a modded AEW Dynamite Arena, so that gives me even less reason to play Fight Forever. Even if it was a more enjoyable gameplay experience, it's just that once you get out of the matches, what else are you gonna do? So yeah.
I was gonna say, I still haven't played 2K25. I don't think I'm ever going to.
You don't need to.
Yeah, I don't think I'm ever reinstalling 2K24 on my Steam Deck either. I had my fun with that game, and you know, whatever.
Yeah.
I did notice yesterday they put up the first episode of Superstars that they have on Peacock for 1992 on the Vault YouTube page. And one thing you'll notice I'm not even going to talk about the Vince is the genius comment, but one thing you'll notice if you look on the WWE Vault YouTube page when you scroll down, people are acting like most of this stuff is like, oh my God, I can't believe this got posted. This is like 95% shit from Peacock and the network, you dumb motherfuckers. Like,
Yeah, they haven't posted anything special in a while.
yeah, they put up Bret Hart and Randy Savage versus Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair the day before my first birthday.
Okay.
This has to be a Coliseum video match.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got commentary and everything. This is a Coliseum video match. Oh yeah, grudges, gripes, and grunts. Well, if you're gonna put the fucking match up, put the whole goddamn tape up. What, you can put a fucking Super Tape Volume 4, you can't put this up? Super Tape 4 sucks. That's the bit. It does feature The Undertaker trying to leapfrog Tugboat, though, if that does anything for anybody.
Does it go wrong?
My memory is it kind of does.
Okay, I might be interested in that.
So that's a thing, I guess. Apparently, Matt Cardona got his hands on the new Danhausen by Zombie Sailor. Apparently, those WrestleCon exclusives are going up at a later date. I'm guessing Memorial Day. So if you want to try to grab the Gladiator, that's probably going to be your next chance.
We still don't know if he has yellow
Yeah.
on the back of his trunks.
I don't think I know J&J Figures had him and they sold out of him, which made me mad because I went to their website. Oh, they probably have him. He was already sold out. I've not seen anybody actually say they got that other than JJ Figures. So, like, I don't know. That's a cool figure, though. I'm going to have to get it just on general principle. I'm wondering, though, like, independent of all the trade war stuff going on, when do we hear about Pinnacle Collection Series 2?
Oh, God knows.
I mean, is that one man gang sample we saw, is that coming in Series 2?
You would think so.
And, like, are we just going to have, like, are every series going to follow the 2 normal size guys, 2 big fat guys rule? I don't think that's possible, though, now that I think about that. Unless Series 2 is going to have one of the headhunters and Series 3 is going to have the other headhunter.
Oh yeah, I forgot all about them.
Yeah, like there's the test shot picture of them out there, but like, who the hell knows when there's so much up in the air with all of these lines now. Because like, who the fuck knows? But that'll probably do us for this week. We've been on here a while. I think we've covered everything.
It's a whopper for sure. Are we gonna have a guest next week, do you know?
Well, he said he would be on. Hold on, just one. I'm gonna fucking confirm this with him. Where is aha?
I enjoyed having
But
Melonbread on. He
yeah,
was
shout outs to Melonbread. He's welcome back whenever the fuck he
yeah,
wants to be on.
really smart guy, knows his shit for sure.
Yeah, I never connected the dots with Matt Mania and everything else.
No.
That's some real like crazy high level detective work,
When
and
he talked about
I'm
like when he stopped basically watching when WCW and there's like didn't get into it because I mean it was a personal thing, but when he moved to Japan, I just imagined like him, and we talked about like he didn't know anything about PWX and thing. I just imagined like he moved to Japan and like trained in the mountains or something, and then just came back and he came back and started playing whatever game was out at the time.
he just resigned to not have the internet. I don't blame him honestly. That's such an interesting thing. Like I would have loved to have been in Japan in the early to mid 2000s. That would have been a
Yeah,
hoot.
yeah, what a time to be there. Yeah,
I also want to note the Liger shoot fight he referenced was with Minoru Suzuki,
yes,
and that was 100% of work.
yeah, that was in the Pancrase.
Yeah, and that's Suzuki's last actual MMA fight.
There's
Um,
also
at-
a Liga alt in King of Colosseum Pattaya.
yeah, yeah, it is. He shows up, does the capo kick, and then Suzuki does some clearly worked bullshit and wins the fight. That's another thing. Before we go, real quick, I saw somebody make a post about like, oh, put Logan Paul in the ring with Minoru Suzuki and see how cocky he is when he gets chopped to infinity. I was a Minoru Suzuki fan 20 years ago on the internet when you couldn't find many. He is a guy, as Lee Casebolt mentioned, because a lot of people don't fucking know this. He came back to pro wrestling because he couldn't handle fucking real fights anymore.
Yeah,
He is
exactly.
25 years older now. He can't bump. He moves at like a fucking quarter of the speed he used to. People need to quit pretending like he's still some like super dangerous guy.
Yeah,
Because I hate to say this, in a shoot in 2025, Logan Paul would crush Minoru Suzuki. Like that's just the unfortunate reality of it. Like Suzuki, and also when you look at like the Pancrase founders, Suzuki wasn't nearly as good of a fighter as Funaki anyway.
hmm.
Like he wasn't a great fighter outside of like the fucking shit he did that was clearly work against like the Lions Den guys. He's a great pro wrestler, don't get me wrong. Both shoot style and pro style, Suzuki was fucking incredible. But this whole idea that like he's a middle-aged man that'll fuck you up, like no, he won't. I'm pretty sure if you throw a leg kick at him right now, that would probably be the end of the fight. And it pains me to see people doing that because every time I see it, I'm confronted with the reality of no, he's really not anymore.
I
He's
saw
not that
a WWE fan try to tell me that Jordan Grace dropping Julia on her head was shoot strong style wrestling, and
good.
I was like, no, and he's like, you obviously don't know what you're talking about, and then he started talking about how good the match was, and I was like, well, that's got nothing to do with it not being shoot style strong style wrestling, and that was the end of the conversation.
People have just adapted strong styles like a catch-all for like Japanese wrestling,
Yeah,
and that's
it's
not the
it's it's lost all meaning to people like that, you know. I mean, we've talked about it before, but it was New Japan terminology to describe their style of wrestling, which had nothing to do with head drops. Yeah, it was strong
no. It
strikes
was
and submissions.
yeah, proving the strength of pro wrestling as a martial art.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, no, that's not fucking Royal Road.
nope.
That's what the head drop stuff actually is.
Yeah, exactly.
I also just genuinely don't think Jordan Grace is a good wrestler.
I
But
hadn't
that's
really seen too much of a. I heard that match was good though, but yeah, I don't know.
but also you've got to I hate to say it this way, but you've got a fucking great WWE stuff on a curve.
True.
Because I saw people claiming like the women's 3-way from Mania Night 2 was like as good as the Unbreakable 3-way, and let me be perfectly clear here. No, the fuck it isn't.
I
That match
did
was really
see
good.
I did see the end of the Backlash last night, and it was very much the same as Cena versus Cody. It was AA, RKO, AA, RKO, AA, RKO. It's just like, and people were like
That's like
raving about
every
it.
Cena match.
Yeah, I know, and people are like raving about it online. I was just like, it reminded me of like, I remember being in like a Ustream way back years ago because someone had the copy of SmackDown, one of the SmackDown versus Raws early, and he had like put as many finishers as you could have, like 5 or whatever, and they were just spamming finishers back and forth. And everyone's like, "That's awesome, this rules!" And I was like, they're not even doing anything. They're just like doing finishers back to back. Like that's not even really showing off the game. You're just showing off one move, and they kicked me. And
Well,
that's how I feel about all these goddamn main events.
you've got to remember the WWE audience, especially in the last like, I mean, it's always been this way. They've only been conditioned to care about the big moves. It's why when you see the dark match footage of like Japanese guys or Mexican guys and they're doing the dopest shit, and the fans are just like, huh?
Yeah.
But you see, like Ray Jr. shows up in WCW, having never been on WCW TV. Everything he does in Baltimore against Dean Malenko gets this huge fucking reaction, and it's like, oh yeah, that's probably not an accident, is it?
Mm.
And that's yeah, I don't fucking know, man. I golly gee whiz. That's all I can say. There have been WWE things in the last like couple of years I've enjoyed. I'm also just resigned to not watching the current product anymore. I can't stand it. Mania Night 2 finished me off. I have zero fucking interest in ever watching that company again.
I wasn't planning on watching Backlash, but like there was nothing on, and it was like I was bored, so I was like, I'll put it on, see what's happening, and that's what I got. And holy shit, the Cena turn sucks. Like really, really bad.
Yeah, well, it also kind of fucking just goes to show what how to put this. This is what he's always fucking thought like a heel in wrestling is. He doesn't actually know.
The funny thing is like seeing people try to defend it, saying, "Oh, it's supposed to be bad." Why would I want to watch it? That doesn't make
It's
any
the
sense.
fucking main event angle. How is it supposed to be bad?
So like, oh, it's supposed to be boring or some shit. I don't know. I can't make any sense of it.
Yeah, that's fucking stupid.
Well, he's wrestling all
I
truth next, so yeah.
is he actually?
Yeah, he all truth came out
Oh
during the main
Jesus
event.
Christ, man!
Yeah.
Sabu died.
What?
Wow, my mom from the living room on that one too. Yeah, I just got messaged by like 3 different people that Sabu died.
Wow.
Okay, so I was going to say before we got off the air, like we didn't talk about Steve Mongo McMichael last week. And I felt really bad about that after we finished recording because of what my fucking nickname is. And so I guess we'll fucking roll these two together real quick. Um okay.
And he just had his last match too recently.
Yeah. So I don't even I don't even know what to say. So I'll just talk about Mongo because I'm not going to be able to gather my thoughts so much on Sabu right now. But I've probably told the story. Mongo is not like a childhood nickname of mine. Um, when I was working for Walmart, I got sent to the quote unquote academy store for a week to further my training when I was in management. And they made the comment to us like, if you could if you have a nickname, if there's something you would prefer to be called, you can just put it there and we'll call you that. So like if you have a nickname or if you have if your government name was there but you preferred the shortened version of it. I crossed my name out and just put Mongo because I've always loved Steve Mongo McMichael. Going back to when I was a kid, I loved playing as the Bears in Tecmo Bowl because on defense I would always go to Mongo. On offense, Walter Payton's running that motherfucking ball. And so when he showed up in WCW, I was like, "Oh, that's the guy from Tecmo Bowl." And my older cousin was a huge football fan and was like, "Oh yeah, he was really cool. He's gonna be a good wrestler." And Mongo was not a conventionally good worker, but also like, "Oh, he's the worst wrestler ever." No, Mongo wrestled like your fucking dad watching the show would wrestle if he put the fucking tights on. That's like the whole appeal. He wrestled like a football player would wrestle. And I'm not going to sit here and name off classic Mongo matches because there's not a ton of them. There's not really any of them. I do like the match with him and Kevin Green against Flair and Arn. And that match is obviously a testament to how good Flair and Arn were. And also Kevin Green's incredible in that match. And Mongo was a great horseman because when he got added to the group, it was the whole like, look at the horsemen. They're successful not just in wrestling, they're champions in everything.
Yeah.
Like this group attracts only the absolute top of their profession. And I was a huge fan of the Mongo figure that came out in that Four Horsemen box set. I was obviously very excited when Grapplers and Gimmicks showed off not only the Regium figure, but also the retro. And I was a little gutted when I found out he'd passed, but it was one of those things where he hadn't been doing well for a long time. And I really fucking hate that the Pro Football Hall of Fame held off on putting him in until he was fairly close to the end. I think, and I don't know what the politics of that are, but the idea that they couldn't have put him in 20 years before the fucking time that they did really disgusts me. And when the news broke, I checked the other website and I saw, for whatever reason, everybody has to say, like, rest in peace, Mongo. He wasn't a very good wrestler. Like, fuck you. Fuck you. I just, goddamn, man. But I loved Mongo. I didn't take the fucking nickname ironically. Like, I wanted to be called that because I have always been a huge fan of Steve Mongo McMichael. And I thought about trying to figure out another name for my handle on the show, and I'm not going to. I fucking Mongo forever. And throughout all of that, I've been trying to figure out something to say about Sabu. And there's a lot. If you grew up in the 90s and you read wrestling magazines, and I sincerely hope the Discord has not crashed on me.
No, we're good.
Perhaps it has. Okay, good. You grew up the same era that I did. You're a couple of years older. But if you grew up in the mid 90s and you read any wrestling magazines, you saw Sabu. Long before his cup of coffee in WCW, long before any sort of major exposure to ECW, he was like the last of the Abdullah the Butcher type guys that you never actually got to see. You just saw them in the magazines, and then when you actually got to see them, the footage matched all of the things that you read and the pictures that you saw. To say that on influence alone he should have been a first ballot Observer Hall of Famer is an understatement. So many people have copied him. You wouldn't have guys doing half the insane dives into the crowd and shit that they do without him. Hardcore wrestling in America looks a lot fucking different without him. In Terry Funk too, but like, Sabu's as important to 90s American pro wrestling as literally any other singular figure you could pick, either directly or indirectly. Like, things did kind of morph around him. And I'm sure people are going to talk about a variety of different things from his career. Obviously, the barbed wire match with Terry Funk, I still to this day think is the best barbed wire match ever. I love the.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I love the barely legal match with Taz as well.
The first Sabu match I saw was I was in the UK, and my brother showed me the triple threat with Shane Douglas and Terry Funk. I think after that, I would have seen him on WCW Nitro. I just don't remember it. The next thing I remember is when he was on Raw, and he dove off the Raw letters, which was pretty crazy to see. I mean, I recorded that ECW Raw because I was so looking forward to it because I still hadn't seen much ECW at the time. And I also want to say, like, one of the magazines covered the FMW Fire match. I remember seeing a lot of pictures of that in one of the magazines. Um, so yeah, you're right in saying, like, if you bought any magazines at the time, like, Sabu was all over them. Like, you couldn't avoid him if you know, were really that much engaged in wrestling where you'd buy the magazines and everything and not just watch the TV. And then obviously later seeing him in ECW, and then just as you said, his influence. And you know, we talk about it all the time, but the influence of the Yaki games or like Fire Pro, and obviously he was all over the Fire Pro games. Um, he was in WCW versus the World as well. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say right now. I wasn't expecting to read that at the end of this podcast.
I think I said this when we talked about the Acclaim ECW games, but a big part of why I wanted Hardcore Revolution was because he was in it.
Yeah, I mean that was
He's
his
the literal first guy I played as.
first official appearance as well, talking about stuff like that. Oh no, he was in
And
Legend. Oh, Legend was after. Geez, sorry.
yeah, Legends like almost 2 years later, like a
Yeah,
year and a
yeah.
half. And he was a big part of why I wanted to play Legends 1 because it's a game with Sabu and the Road Warriors. Like that's, and you know, by that point, Fire Pro had entered my life, and that was maybe around the time that I figured out, like, oh wait, no, Sabu and the Road Warriors are just in this game too. But like SmackDown '08, I knew that game was going to be dog shit. I didn't care. One fucking reason: Sabu for a
Um,
shoot. That was when everything came out. Like the game got gutted roster wise. The fucking story mode's going to be nothing. At least fucking it's not the old SmackDown gameplay, but I'm going to get to see what SmackDown fucking Sabu is like. And God, just what a fucking way to end the show. And I mean,
yeah.
to tie it back to figures, he was the most anticipated figure for me was Zombie Sailor Series 1,
I
like
also want
by
to
a wide margin.
mention Champion Wrestler with the chair assisted moonsault, uh,
Yeah.
which is just really, really, really cool.
Is
Um,
that the best portrayal of Sabu in a video game?
is that the what? Sorry.
The best portrayal of Sabu in a video game? I think it might be.
Based on that alone, I think so because no other game has done anything like that. I mean, there's moves on Movecraft, but obviously they're not official. To have something
Right.
so signature like that is pretty fucking cool.
Yeah. Like there's a million matches I could talk about right now. And you know, maybe next week at the end we'll say some more about him.
Yeah,
But what a fucking fuck, man, what a loss. Shout outs to Mongo. Shout outs to Sabu. Until next time. Next week we may have another Aki community guest. I think actually he was one of the people that told me about Sabu. It was like, hey, you're good to record next week. Yeah, yup. Enter also fuck RIP Sabu. So
jeez.
yeah. Next week we're gonna have another little interview type thing. And also he knows a little bit about collecting action figures, so maybe he'll be in on that too. I don't know. But yeah, until next time, stay safe and all the other stuff I say at the end.